Alabama and Tennessee syndicated news talk leader Rightside Radio. This is JP here live in the Rightside studios, covering the local, the state, the national, all the issues. And oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid conservative and just plain right. Well, folks, Phil had to be out today in regards to something very exciting that we will be able to tell y'all any day now about, but he will have to miss the show today. So I will be doing the first hour of today's show, and then Scott Buttram will be coming in at the second hour for the rest of the show. And it's always a fun time with Scott, so y'all make sure to stay tuned for that. But first and foremost, folks, it is Taco Tuesday.
But more importantly, y'all know what today is, right? It's Taco Tuesday!
That's right. Speedy Gonzalez letting you know it is Taco Tuesday. And like I said, I will be starting off the first hour of today's show. I got a monologue written up for y'all. And then after the monologue, we got to talk about some foreign policy. It's been a lot going on the last several days in foreign policy land. Trump and Zelenskyy had another meeting on Friday that apparently was very contentious, and we're going to talk about that. But also the Trump and Putin summit in Budapest is now off. So we're going to talk about all the latest in the Russia-Ukraine war. And then also this past weekend, the very fragile, it appears, Israel-Hamas ceasefire. It was tested. Okay. It was tested, but JD Vance is now in the Middle East and Israel. He touched down today and is trying to hold this ceasefire together and get this across the finish line. Like I said, folks, what Hamas agreed to was the first phase of a 20-point plan. And it looks like they're going to be dragging their feet and resisting the rest of that 20-point plan, which, it would bring an end to the war as a whole. So we're going to talk about all of that, and then after that, Scotty Buttram will be coming in. So we got a good show for y'all today. In the meantime, I got a monologue written up for you guys. Like I said, this monologue, as always, is brought to you by attorney Stan McDonald. Stan McDonald, a lawyer at the partner at the law firm of Wilmer & Lee, so I'll be talking about Stan here momentarily after I do this monologue. All right, so let me just start off by saying we've got a serious problem here in America. And I was just talking about foreign policy. The Trump administration is working around the clock trying to put out fires and fix problems globally. But there's a serious problem taking place before our eyes right here in our own backyard. And to sum it up, the problem I'm referring to is the assault on federal workers in cities like Portland and Chicago with the backing of local politicians and the cover from local police. That right there is a recipe for a disaster. And if it keeps up, it's a recipe for a civil war. I'm an optimist through and through, and I reject the notion that we are on the brink of any form of civil war. But if this trend continues, we could be walking ourselves right into one eventually. If you've seen or read the news lately, I'm sure you've seen the current scenes in Portland. Rioters are assaulting federal ICE and DHS agents in broad daylight with the support of the Portland police, the governor of Oregon, and a federal judge. With a literal war zone taking place in the streets of Portland, the National Guard was ordered to go in and shut it down, and to protect our federal agents simply there to do their job. Well, an activist judge saw this and put a block on Trump's deployment of the National Guard. That is unheard of. Thank goodness this order was thrown out by an appeals court, but we've seen this play out several times in our nation's history. Eisenhower, JFK, and LBJ are just a few examples of presidents that deployed the National Guard to enforce the federal law against defiant governors. All of these instances were applauded loudly by liberals, and not a single accusation of fascism was thrown towards any of those presidents. So why are we seeing that now? Why is it fascism for the president to exercise his right as the executive to shut down a fight against the federal government? And that's what it is. These are nihilistic agitators that have been given free rein to attack not just federal agents, but reporters, innocent bystanders, and turn the beautiful city of Portland into a scene out of Mad Max. Nick Sortor, a conservative reporter who now has to have armed security with him in Portland to just report the news, was attacked by Antifa several weeks ago, and the Portland police arrested him. Not the agitators, of course. The only conclusion from that is that the local police are on the same team as Antifa. There's actually been instances where the police have stepped aside and let Antifa block the roads and monitor who could pass through. There's footage from last night of Portland police actually standing in front of Antifa members that were shining lights in the faces of DHS agents. A DHS officer actually walked up to the police and said, "What are you doing? These guys are Antifa." Antifa, a domestic terrorist organization, by the way. And that's where we have a problem. If the Portland police is so infiltrated and unable to protect their citizens, then the federal government will have to step in and do exactly that. And you have no grounds to refuse that, Miss Activist Judge. Hey, Governor of Oregon, you actually don't have the authority to rebel against the federal government. We've already fought a civil war of that, and Trump has the legal precedent to just simply ignore you. If you're not going to do your job as governor and just let Portland turn into a degenerate city similar to Sodom and Gomorrah, then Dad will have to step in and do so. It's not only Portland, though. It's currently the worst case, but it's the same way in Chicago. Governor Pritzker has decided it would be politically advantageous to defy President Trump and give air cover for domestic terrorists in his own city of Chicago. He mocks the idea that there's any need for the National Guard while taking a stroll through the nicest parts of Chicago, conveniently avoiding the areas that are currently being affected by agitators going to war with ICE agents. These reckless idiots are trying to stoke the flames of a civil war. But I actually don't think they're even smart enough to know what they're doing. Just look at Pritzker, for example. Listen to him talk. Does he really strike you as someone that's impressive? These narcissistic egomaniacs in Oregon and Illinois are just simply doing what's best for them politically. They don't have to actually deal with Antifa turning their neighborhood into a war zone where they can't even walk their dog. They don't have to worry about noise being blared deliberately while they're trying to put their kids to bed because they've got school in the morning. They can sit in their ivory towers and position themselves to run for president in 2028, like Pritzker is doing. And they're so self-centered that that's all they care about. Their position as governor is not to do what's best for their constituents, it's just to use the office as a stepping stone towards their next political endeavor. And that is when it's the federal government's job to do their job for them. And here's what I would like the Trump administration to do. Go all the way. They'll be held up temporarily by lower courts like we saw in Portland, but eventually they will be given the green light to deploy the National Guard. And when that happens, they must do whatever it takes to restore order in these cities. Completely emasculate these defiant governors and dismantle the Antifa terrorists. That's the only way to do this, because if any half measures are taken, they will use that to completely destroy our cities, and if the Democrats ever take power again, then they'll be looking for revenge. Trump needs to not only show the likes of Governor Pritzker who's boss, but Antifa has to be dismantled. We saw the first charges of domestic terrorism against 2 Antifa members in Texas just recently, and those need to be the first of many. Antifa terrorists who are attacking our federal workers need to be put under the jail. The DOJ needs to follow the money who's giving them access to storage facilities and giving them office buildings as headquarters. They need to be completely destroyed and given no ability to regroup. That is the only way forward as a nation. The only way forward is straight through. And if there's any folks in this administration who are pearl clutching and saying, oh, that's too much, what about the midterms? Get with the program, people. Look at what these terrorists are doing to our ICE agents. Look at what they're doing to our beautiful cities. They've declared war against the federal government. It's your job as an administration to stop them by any means necessary. There's many problems to address globally, from Venezuela to Ukraine to Gaza, but if we can't put out the fire in our own backyard, then what's the point? No one else is going to come save us. This is how we stop a civil war from happening. Tucker Carlson did a monologue on these Portland riots recently. He put it best when he said that a civil war starts when American citizens have absolutely nothing in common with each other in different parts of America. And I think that's exactly right. But what I'm not referring to is just simple political disagreements. Like in Massachusetts, they believe in free healthcare and taxing the rich, where in Tennessee, they believe in God and the Second Amendment. That's not what ultimately divides us. We saw this after 9/11. We all disagreed politically, but when there was an attack on our nation, we were all united. That showed that our political disagreements never truly divided us. We were still able to come together towards a common enemy. But think about it now. God forbid, if we ever had another instance like 9/11, would we truly come together like we did then? Or would groups like Antifa and the Free Palestine crowd celebrate the attack on America? Would we point our fingers at one another saying it's the other side's fault? Unfortunately, I think the latter is true. That's not the case for everyone, but the size of people as to which it is true is growing, and they're getting bolder. Because now what divides us is not just simply politics, it's our core fundamental beliefs. It's the belief in God versus nihilistic atheism. It's the nuclear family versus the hatred of family and celebration of murder via abortion. It's the reverence of Western civilization versus the desire to completely destroy it. And that's what the terrorists in Portland and Chicago are fighting for. It's an attack on what is good and worth preserving in our civilization. But did you ever imagine that these people would be given air cover from politicians like Pritzker, AOC, Schumer, Pelosi, Schiff, Booker, Jeffries, I can name them all. These morons want to see it all burn to the ground for their own gain. That's why this administration must go in and do what needs to be done. The federal government must restore order immediately. So what can you do? For one, we need to let the Trump administration do their job. Do not take it upon yourself to combat these agitators. Stay way clear of any Antifa war zones. And if one does find its way to your neck of the woods, then find somewhere else to take your family until things settle down. Let the National Guard come in and do its job. But also pray fervently and speak out. Shine a light on the issues at hand and pray for this country every day. 2 days ago marked 244 years since Cornwallis has surrendered to Washington at Yorktown. The punctuation mark on the greatest revolution the world has ever seen. We're a bunch of 20-something-year-olds, and they all got together and stood up for a cause, and we're victorious. The kickstart of the nation we all love and would die for. Don't forget the nation we have, and don't forget the need to preserve it, because our founding fathers sacrificed so much to give us this beautiful nation, the greatest one to ever grace the earth. But Benjamin Franklin said it best when he said, or he was asked, do we have a republic or do we have a monarchy? And then he replied, a republic, if you can keep it. And keep it, we must. And that's a wrap for the Rightside Way. Yeah, like I said, folks, if you haven't seen, just take a look at what's going on right now in Portland. It is complete insanity. And the federal government has to go in and restore order immediately, because if they don't, if they're unsuccessful, take any half measures and don't do what needs to be done, it's only going to get worse. And then, God forbid, if the Democrats regroup, they're just going to use it to get revenge on us. So we have to handle this issue in our own backyard. This is JP here, filling in for Phil today on Right Side Radio. We'll be right back.
But we got friendlies all over the ground down here. So we can't go in here and just blasting away. When we see bad guys, we got to get situationally aware so we know where all of our forces are before you start launching 6,000 rounds a minute downrange.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in an urban environment, I don't want to say it's impossible, but right on the rooftops, it's really difficult to sort all that out. Because first of all, they're all taking cover. So, they're not standing out there waving at you. They're all taking cover. So trying to figure out where everybody was would have probably taken us a while. In the end, we only made it around 3 times when we got nailed by an RPG.
So RPG to the tail rotor, right?
Right.
In the movie, and later I want to get your thoughts on the movie, like I said, but in the movie, there's a scene where you took the RPG to the tail rotor, but initially you thought it was going to be okay until you started getting some play in the pedals and stuff like that. So what were your first thoughts, and how did that I mean?
Well, I knew we were hit, and I always tell people if you want to know what it feels like, drive too fast in a parking lot and hit a speed bump. That's what it felt like. It felt like a jolt to the airframe, because you don't see it. Usually what they were doing is they let us fly by, and then they emerge from the doorway and shoot. So you're probably not going to see the launch. The crew chief might see it, depending if they're looking in the right direction. And then the reason they hit both of us in the tail is they're not leading us enough. So that 50-knot magical speed was just ballistically perfect for them to shoot at I'm sure they're aiming for center mass.
Which the crazy thing is, an RPG is not usually designed to take out aircraft.
No, but if you fire enough of them, eventually, they say they fired 150 at us on that mission. Now, not just at me, but on that mission. That's how many RPGs.
I never heard that. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, they went all in. They thought, we want to bring down a helicopter, and they were successful. So anyway, back to your question. Initially, I feel like I hit a speed bump, knew we were hit. I can see the airfield. It's 2 miles ahead of us. And looking in the cockpit, everything's okay. Controls were all responding. But what had happened was the gearbox had been blown apart, and it's like a transmission in your car, right? If you blow your transmission apart,
you ain't going anywhere.
Not for very long. Once those
gears
run without oil for any period of time, they're going to self-destruct, and that's what happened. And then when the tail rotor left the aircraft, again, that's impossible to describe. If you haven't experienced it, I can't describe it. I mean, it's just violent spin of the aircraft, out of control.
What do they call that? Counter rotation or something, where you're trying to restore?
Yeah, it's
stability?
well, the tail rotor is there to counter the torque of the main rotor
Right.
system. Again, if you think about a drill, people are familiar with that. You pull the trigger, you can feel it want to turn. That's torque. So the same thing's happening to a helicopter, obviously with a lot more force. The tail rotor is mounted horizontally to push against that force that's wanting the airframe to spin. Once that tail rotor is gone, there's nothing. So essentially, if you were left affected by anything else, what would eventually happen is the airframe, minus wind drag, obviously, would be spinning as fast as the rotor blades are in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That's essentially once it reached equilibrium. That will never happen, but that's how much force you're talking about here. And I remember looking at my feet, trying to convince myself, you're doing the right thing in terms of which pedal you're pushing, but it is having no effect on the aircraft. And then I'm like, okay, we lost the tail rotor. You know, again, this is you can't train that. There's no, you can't do it in a simulator. I mean, we can do a loss of tail rotor in a simulator, but you can't do the violent effects, the physical violent effects of the airframe in a simulator. But I knew what had happened, and the only thing you can do is shut the engines off, because again, that's what's creating that torque. So if you can remove that force, it'll stop that spin, but now you have no engines.
Yeah.
So that's not good either, especially at low altitude. But it's what you have to do. You can't possibly maintain control of the aircraft if it's just spinning out of control. So in a Black Hawk, we don't have control of the engines on the flight controls. So the co-pilot or the non-flying pilot has to shut the engines off. So I looked over at Ray and I said, we lost the tail. We better pull him off. And he knew. He was an experienced guy. I actually had more experience than I did. And pulled the engines off. But we're spinning so fast that he said, and we talked about it on the ground afterwards, typical instructor pilots, he said, we're spinning so fast, the centrifugal force was causing him to not be able to lift his arms up over his head, which is where the engine power control levers are. So he got one to idle and got one about halfway off.
And we are back. This is JP here, filling in for Phil today on Rightside Radio, covering the local, the state, the national, all of the issues. It's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, I got some texts coming in from you guys, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. But first, I got to tell you guys about Stan McDonald. Stan McDonald sponsors the Right Side Way monologue every single day, and he's a 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama. Not only will Stan advocate and fight for your legal needs, but he is an absolute warrior for causes near and dear to our Right Side ruffian community. And like we like to say, when you have Stan on your side, there's no greater friend, and your adversaries will have no greater foe. So Stan McDonald, I'm going to give you all his phone number, 256-533-0202. That's Stan McDonald at Wilmer and Lee, 256-533-0202. And when you call him, make sure you tell him that you heard it on Right Side Radio. All right, you guys, let's get some text messages here. We got Dave from Capshaw saying, economic quote of the day from Adam Smith. There is no art which government sooner learns of another than that of draining money from the pockets of the people. Amen to that, unfortunately. We got Pastor Dave from Indiana said, what happened to the boomers? That seemed to be the majority of people I've seen during the No King protests. I thought that generation had more common sense than that. There's good boomers. It's a fringe sect of very miserable, unhappy boomers, I would say, that were at these No King protests. And I feel bad for them, because obviously that they don't have a fulfilling life of their own to go to outside of, going to a Hate America protest on a Saturday. They didn't have any T-ball games or grandkid stuff to do on those days, obviously. So I feel bad for them, but it's not all the boomers, I promise. We got Allie from Athens said, well done and well said, JP. I appreciate that. I particularly like the fact that you reminded us that the founding fathers on average were 27 years old. Yeah, that is true. It's a bunch of young men that decide to stick up for something and put their neck on the line like that and start literally the greatest nation ever. It's pretty remarkable. 244 years, by the way, 2 days ago, like I said, when when Yorktown was surrendered to George Washington. It's pretty remarkable. So yeah, I think it's important to always remember that. Tom with all the kids from Huntsville said, paraphrasing here, but Billy Graham said something to the effect of, "Show me where you spend your time and your money, and I'll know where your heart is." We already know where their hearts are. We need to start taking away their time and their money. If Trump can stop the funding and actually put some of them away, that'll help tremendously. I agree. And there's been several great people that have done like a follow the money segments on their shows about where this Antifa money appears to be coming from. And, you just don't organically get storage units and office buildings for, headquarters for your protest. That's not something that just kind of happens on its own. I think there's some people behind the scenes helping them funding wise and pulling strings for them. So I agree. I mean, it's just like terrorists in the Middle East, like Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, their source of funding has always been Iran. So when Iran is weak, then they are weak. And we've seen that lately. So I think you cut off the source of the funding with the domestic terrorists like Antifa, and I think you'll see a same result. Jeff from Indiana texted in and said, JP, these insurrectionist judges need to be taken off the bench. Just like someone in the military cannot obey an unlawful order, why does the president have to obey an unlawful order from a judge when has no basis in law to stop him? Well, thank goodness this ridiculous ban from the National Guard going to Portland was overruled by an appeals court. So although these activist judges, they're being nuisances and they're getting away, they're being roadblocks, most of these ridiculous orders are being overturned by a higher appeals court. So for the most part, besides these lower level judges, these activist judges, the appeals court across the nation have been doing their job for the most part, and the Supreme Court as well. So like I said, although these are being roadblocks and nuisances, I think the system as a whole is still acting like it's supposed to, and these unlawful orders are being overruled. So we'll have to see. There's still a lot of stuff like tariffs that have made its way up to the Supreme Court and will be ruled upon soon. But for the most part, like I said, these outrageous orders are being overruled. John from Huntsville said, JP, spectacular monologue. I appreciate that. So also, did you see that the Blue Jays beat the Mariners last night? I did, to advance to the World Series and now face the Dodgers. Looks like it's going to be Canada versus USA World Series championship title. I'm going to have to go for Canada on this one because I do not want the Dodgers to win back-to-back. Just tell you that. I can think of a lot of things I'd rather see than the Dodgers win back-to-back World Series. Jack from Huntsville texting in said, many have bemoaned the younger generation over the years. I have always said that it is my generation, parentheses boomers, that raised them. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. There's great boomers out there. So it's I wouldn't let the fringe sect of them that are out being miserable at these No King protests put across the board on these baby boomers. But unfortunately, I agree that does seem to be the main demographic at these No King protests, miserable older boomers. So we'll have to see if there's any more of those that come around the No King protests. But we're going to take a quick time out here, folks. And on the other side, I'm going to talk to you all about some foreign policy, the newest information there with Ukraine and Israel. A lot of stuff happening and a lot of stuff going good, a lot of stuff going bad. So we're going to break it all down for you on the other side here. This is JP here, filling in for Phil on Rightside Radio today. We'll be right back.
The spin, but didn't stop it. And now, with no engine power, we're falling out of the sky like a Coke machine. And all I could do is try to keep the aircraft from flipping upside down, which, again, I don't know if anything I did made a difference, honestly, but all I can tell you is we crashed right on the wheels. And that's the only reason I'm still here.
All right, so you're on impact. Now, you said something on the ground. Did Ray make it?
Yeah,
okay.
We all survived the crash.
Okay.
The crew chiefs were hurt really bad because they don't, first of all, they don't have as good as seats, at least in that version of the aircraft. It's been improved since. And they're probably not strapped in, meaning, they operate on what we call monkey harnesses back there.
Yeah.
So they're on a strap, but they're not strapped into their seats, which have all of this crash survivability.
I use those as a jump master in Blackhawks
because it allows you to move around and do the things you need to do. And you get in the seat when you have to land. Well, they didn't. Obviously, we're not planning to land, so they're probably not strapped in, or at least not likely that they're both strapped in. So, that violent crash, they were probably not going to make it. But Ray, I mean, he was not hurt as bad as I was. And we're talking, once I regained consciousness, we're talking about what happened, and there was no reason to talk about what happened. We should have been talking about, hey, the heck, we're going to survive the next 5 minutes here. But we did, and that's when he explained what he had tried to do. And And then he was able to get himself out of the cockpit. There's no way I could get out. I had a femur fracture, crushed vertebrae in my spine. It's hard to get out of a Black Hawk cockpit when you're healthy. With those injuries, there's no way. So I just thought, I'm just going to fight it out from the cockpit.
I did not recall that your co-pilot had made it, but they didn't survive. Am I correct?
Well, they were killed in a firefight.
Yeah, they're all killed in the firefight. Yeah, I remember that now. All right, you're still stuck in the cockpit. I remember, I'm assuming it was when I read it, that you had a kind of an off the books weapon. Didn't you have an MP5 or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Was that standard issue, or
It was
that
for us?
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah, we used the MP5. They don't use it anymore, I don't think. But that was our we had an M9 pistol and an MP5.
So you wound up having to engage targets yourself while you're on the ground in the cockpit?
Actually, not from the cockpit. That's one area where Black Hawk Down deviates from what actually happened. I mean, I did consult a little bit on the movie, but really not much. I guess if they're going to exaggerate something and make you look better than you actually were, that's a good thing. But yeah, they have me, blasting away from the cockpit. It was amazing how quickly Gary Gordon and Randy Sugart got to the cockpit. There were no Somalis there yet. And that's why I hadn't fired any rounds. I had my MP5. I was ready to go, but nobody had showed up. And then all of a sudden, Gary and Randy are standing next to the cockpit. And I'm like, wow, this is over. There's a rescue force here.
Which is an amazing story in itself. I mean, both of them wound up with the Medal of Honor posthumously. But I recall reading that they both requested 7 times to be put on the ground, knowing full well that there was only going to be 2 of them and no telling how long till the guys of the Rangers got there.
You're right about all of that. And again, I only know about it secondhand because obviously I'm not on the aircraft with them. But they were told initially no, and eventually convinced the leadership that if they were not let in, we were lost. And, you don't know what's in the mind of someone else, but they had to know, hey, this is going to be dicey at a minimum, because it took 8 hours for another American to get to our crash site.
Yeah, which is crazy when you think about the fact that as you were going down, you could see the airfield roughly 2 miles away, and yet it took 8 hours for anybody to get there.
And it's because, well, we were resource constrained, and there were so many things happening. You had 6-1's crash site, you had the convoy, you had the target, now you had my crash site. So really, the commander's got 4 things that he's got to deal with, and he didn't even really have the resources for one.
By the way, I'm going to chase a rabbit real quick. I don't know if you heard this yet, but the whole base renaming thing that happened.
I was going to bring this up
about Gary Gordon.
Yeah. And it's a brilliant solution. And I just read it a couple days ago.
Yeah. For those who don't know, that Fort Gordon was one of the names that nobody knew.
And we are back. This is JP here, filling in for Phil today on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, folks, Phil had to be out today in regards to something that we are looking forward to telling y'all about any day now. But in the meantime, it is still top secret. But he's off doing some cool stuff today. But in the meantime, I'll be finishing out this hour. And then Scott Butchram will be coming in hour number 2 for the rest of the show in the studio. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And appreciate y'all texting in 833-687-4448. Keep texting in your thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and dive into some content here, though. So it's been a big last couple of days in the foreign policy land. We saw the ceasefire against Israel and Hamas last week, but this past weekend, it looks like that ceasefire was really put to the test when there was some combat action in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. But also, we've got some big stuff going on in terms of Russia and Ukraine. Not looking too optimistic, though. I'm going to have to be honest with you guys here. So we're going to cover the Ukraine-Russia stuff first, since a lot has happened even today in regards to that. So Trump and Zelenskyy met this past Friday in the Oval Office, trying to come together and talk about a ceasefire and that war. Trump also had a phone call with Putin last week before this meeting with Zelenskyy. And everybody remembers the contentious meeting in front of everyone, in front of the press in the Oval Office, where, Trump was shouting at Zelenskyy, and JD Vance was saying, have you said thank you once? So it's everybody saw that, but this one was behind closed doors, and apparently from reporting, it looks like this meeting did not go too well either. So we've had several reports from the Financial Times, the New York Times, Washington Post, and others, but the main summary from this meeting, apparently, like I said, it was very contentious. Trump claimed that Putin is going to destroy Ukraine if they did not take the deal. And apparently Trump was just saying what Putin had told him in the phone call the day before. And he claimed that Russia's economy was doing well. Zelenskyy needs to take the deal provided. And Trump was weighing before the meeting, giving Ukraine Tomahawk missiles, but ultimately declined to do so. And Trump and his administration are currently working very hard to get a ceasefire in this deal before ultimately coming up with a long-term deal to end the war completely. And according to the Financial Times, Trump several times in the meeting threw aside maps of the current lines that were shown to him, said he was tired of hearing about the front lines and just wanted to bring an end to this war. So this war's got some teeth to it, folks. And I'll be honest with you. The Israel-Hamas war it also had a lot of teeth to it, but this one has been tied up into a knot that I think is pretty dang hard to untie. And you can thank the Biden administration for that one. You can thank Joe Biden. You can thank Anthony Blinken. You can thank John Kirby and the complete disaster. The complete disaster. One of the worst foreign policy disasters in American history, I think, with how they handled this Russia-Ukrainian war, because there was no off-ramp. There was no long-term thinking. It was simply fund Ukraine as much as they want, blank check, and continue to provoke Russia and get us into a Cold War with Russia via proxy of Ukraine. And that was the plan. And do not talk to Putin. Putin bad, Russia bad. Don't talk to them. And we will just continue to fund them and hope that Ukraine can pull something off and beat them, which has effectively brought a stalemate in Europe. One of the worst ones since World War II, probably the worst one since World War II. And it's just been a meat grinder. Ukraine has been a complete and total meat grinder for both sides. And there were several opportunities, towards the beginning of the war, Ukraine really pushed back Russia after their initial advancement. And that was the time, Ukraine had leverage. Ukraine was in a position where they could actually negotiate. And that was the time for the Biden administration to come in and negotiate an end to the war. And there actually was a ceasefire and an end to the war brought up, and they were going to have a summit about it. Boris Johnson then goes over there on the behest of the Biden administration and shuts down this deal. Then going on for now, 3 years or 2 years, 3 years of a complete and total meat grinder in Europe. So Trump is now in the position of trying to untie this knot that the Biden administration tied. And it is a very, very hard thing to do with this war in particular, because with the meat grinder that it is, Russia has way more people that they can push through this meat grinder. Okay. Even with the stalemate in Ukraine holding the line against Russia, if it's a war of attrition and it's a war of just simply putting their own men through the meat grinder, Russia has got more men to do that with. And ultimately, I believe time is on Russia's side in this situation, because, like I said, with Ukraine's success that they've had in holding up Russia, it can only happen for so long. There's only so many people in Ukraine for them to do that. So the best thing for Ukraine, the best thing for America, is to put an end to this. Okay. And I hate to say that, this is not Trump's fault. This is not Trump's fault that this war has gotten to where it is. It is his job to end it, though, and he's trying his hardest to do that. Unfortunately, I don't see a way to bring the end to this war without Russia getting some land in this, okay? Because with the lines where they draw now, Russia is in control of majority, if not all, of the Donbass. And apparently that is what Putin wants in exchange to an end of the war. Putin is asking for Donetsk to be Russia now, and Donetsk is a major city in the eastern region of Ukraine, considered the Donbass, a very high mineral-rich territory, which is a major reason why Russia wants this, obviously, is for the minerals there. And Putin is willing to give up areas in Zaporizhzhia, I believe that's how you pronounce it, and Kherson, for full surrender of Donetsk. And those are two territories that Russia has not even been able to hold. So they made some pushes for it, but ultimately Ukraine has pushed them back from Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. So Putin is willing to give that up if Ukraine gives up Donetsk. However, on the other side, it looks like Ukraine and Zelenskyy are not willing to give up any territory. That is a red line for them. They're not giving up any territory in this to end the war. They feel it's not right, because obviously Putin and Russia started the war. Why should they have to give up territory? Which I fully understand and I get. Okay, but if Ukraine's not able to push Russia back out of this territory, it's just one of those things. I mean, I don't know how else to end this war, because Putin has said his demands, and I think he's got more people to just, he can play this game longer. Unfortunately, I think in this war in Ukraine of a stalemate meat grinder. So I think it would behoove Zelenskyy in Ukraine to compromise a little bit here, however much it hurts. You got to put an end to this war. And that is what's best for America, putting an end to this war, because this war has done nothing but continue to drive a wedge between the West and Russia, and America and Russia primarily. And that's not good for America to, we're not going to be allies with Russia, obviously, but I don't think it is the best policy to continue to put us at odds with Russia even more. So I think the best situation, put an end to the killing. Yeah, I don't see a situation of that happening without Ukraine having to give up some land. But Putin also was supposed to eventually have a summit with Trump in Budapest and to talk about a ceasefire and end to the war. But apparently Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov had a phone call today, and Lavrov relayed to him that nothing has changed since the Alaska summit. Russia is not going to have a ceasefire. If they're going to bring an end to the war, they're going to bring an end to the war completely. So after that, there's no more summit in Budapest soon. So that seems a little bit It's not looking great, in my opinion, if they're not having a summit. But we'll see. There's still a lot more time. There's still a lot more, negotiating to do. But that is where the Ukraine and Russia situation currently stands. That the summit in Budapest being off is news as of today after Rubio and Lavrov's phone call. And on the other side, though, we go to Israel. J.D. Vance has touched down in Israel today. Why is that? Because there was a lot of fighting in Israel, or in Gaza, I should say, this past weekend. There's accusations from both sides that Hamas is saying Israel violated the ceasefire, Israel saying Hamas violated the ceasefire. But the main consensus is that there was an incident where 2 IDF soldiers were killed in Gaza by what appears to be rogue Hamas militants. And then Israel proceeded to shut off the aid that was passing through the Rafah crossing and bombarded several Hamas holdings in Gaza, and is now saying that they're going to punish Hamas whenever they break a ceasefire, and they want to hold this ceasefire. But if when incidents like this happen, Israel is going to hold them responsible. But currently, as of now, the aid has been put on hold through the Rafah crossing. If you guys remember, part of the ceasefire agreement was that Hamas would transfer over the hostages and Israel would transfer over prisoners that they had, and aid would be allowed into Gaza while the ceasefire was taking place. But now, during this bombardment and after this incident, the aid has been stopped, which is awful for the Palestinians. But also Hamas is still trying to dig up and find the bodies of several hostages. They're claiming that they're going to need to be excavated and they're going to have to find them. So Hamas still has not gotten Israel all of the hostages alive and deceased yet. So until that happens, it's phase 1 of the ceasefire is still not going to be considered, complete. But after this incident this past weekend, J.D. Vance touched down along with Jared Kushner, and I believe Steve Witkoff was there as well, in Israel to try to hold this ceasefire together, hold this truce together. And it's as of now, like I said, there's several issues in this, because Gaza, a lot of Palestinians in Gaza do not have internet. So there's been apparently several instances of Palestinians driving into restricted areas. They weren't sure which areas were restricted or not. There was a lot of confusion amongst the Palestinians who are now coming back into Gaza after they fled south during the war. Now that they've come back in, there's been some confusion about where the restricted lines are. It's been suspicious cars, like I said, that the IDF has had to confront. And then instances like this. Even Trump himself said he does not believe that Hamas leadership directed, militants to attack and kill these IDF soldiers. He believes that these were rogue militants because, as you can probably, conclude, a lot of Hamas who simply want Israel wiped off the face of the earth were not too happy about the ceasefire, and they just want to destroy Israel. So there's probably a lot of rogue militants who were just wanting to kill IDF soldiers as they saw them, and to heck with the ceasefire. And it's unfortunate situation. But J.D. Vance is over there trying to talk to both sides, let cooler heads prevail, and hopefully soon we can see the aid brought back into Gaza. We can see the fighting from both sides to stop, hostages, the dead bodies can be brought back, and then we can move on with the ceasefire. But this is the Middle East, folks. This is the Middle East wrapped into one story, because even with a ceasefire, there was a lot of people very cautious that this is going to hold. And it looks like this lasted maybe a week. The ceasefire is still technically being held to largely, but it's on thin ice. I'll just say that. The ceasefire is on thin ice because both sides are now having flare-ups. But hopefully, like I said, this can be brought to a hold and the fighting can stop and the ceasefire can move on, and then hopefully bring a truce where Hamas demilitarizes, leaves Gaza. They've already made clear that they're not going to lay down their arms and leave Gaza. So as we predicted, that Hamas was going to have an issue with that, which is a fundamental part of this truce, the 20 plan, peace plan. Hamas cannot have any arms, and Hamas, if they're going to be in Gaza, has to lay down their arms. So unless that happens, it's going to be hard to see an end to the war other than this ceasefire. But more to come. But that is the latest in foreign policy land. We're going to take a quick time out here. Come to the other side and read some of y'all's texts. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Let me know your thoughts on the discussion here, and we'll be right back.
Apparently tied to a Confederate. I didn't know that Benning was. I didn't know that Rucker was. I just went and trained there, as I'm sure you probably did. But Fort Gordon got renamed to something, but Fort Gordon's getting its name back for your rescuer, Gary Gordon.
Right.
Yeah, that's. I think that's pretty. Now we got to find a Fort Shugart somewhere.
Yeah, they might have to create one. Yeah.
What do you recall about Shugart and Gordon being on the ground? I mean, I've read their story separately. I've read it in your book, but give me and the listeners, when they got on the ground and were talking, what were your thoughts? What was the conversation?
It was brief, purely mission focused. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They knew, hey, look, we got to get him out of the cockpit, meaning me, because I'm too vulnerable there. I'm sitting up, basically up off the ground, elevated, and so that was one of the primary things they wanted to get done, is get me out of there, and then essentially, as well as I could, set up a perimeter. Now, the way the geography of this crash site was, there was a wall right to the right. The nose is pointing forward as I'm sitting here, and there's a wall right to the right. Now, it's just a corrugated tin wall, basically, but still, there's no way for someone to access the site from there. So I believe their decision was, we're going to go secure the left side, put me on the right, and that is, in fact, where the attack primarily came from, was the left side. So I can hear it, and then I could see Somalis, onesie, twosies. I fired all the rounds in my weapon at the Somalis that tried to come in on the right side, but the bulk of the attack came from the left side.
How long were Shugart and Gordon in the mix? I mean, how long until they were actually taken?
It's hard to say. I know there's an official timeline somewhere. I honestly don't recall. Time is so hard to judge when things are in that state of chaos. I would say probably 10 minutes, maybe 15, from the time they showed up to the side of the aircraft to, Gary went down first, and at that point, Randy's almost out of ammunition already. And he came around and he asked me where the crew chief's weapons were, and I told him, and he went in, grabbed one, and then he gave me what I believe was Gary's weapon, which still had rounds in it, because I had fired all the rounds out of my MP5. And then he went around the nose of the bird. He made a quick radio call, and we were told on the radio that a reaction force was en route. Again, cause for a little bit of optimism here. Yeah. And then he went and made his last stand on the other side.
Were 160th aircraft overhead? I mean, were you getting any kind of air cover at all when you were down?
Well, we're not getting any air cover, but that call that he made that call on what we call the fire net, meaning it's a fire support net. So he's talking to attack little birds probably. And I think I recognize the voice of the guy who answered him that said a reaction force is en route. So they're overhead. But again, you're talking 4 targets here, and the commander's got to put
he's got triage
his assets where they can do the most good. And right now, that's the main target and 6-1, because 6-1 was close to the main target. The convoy's too fluid. It's all over the place. And then we are, unfortunately, just a couple guys that, and I don't criticize or fault him for this. He's resource constrained. He's only got so much he can do. We were kind of left on our own.
Left on your own for how long? Do you recall? I mean, do you have a rough timeline of how long you were there?
Well, when Gary and Randy went down, it's 15 minutes. It's over. They overran the site. Yeah.
which I'm on the one hand sounds like nothing, but it's also an eternity, I'm sure, when you're in the middle of it.
Yep.
Let me ask you that, and I'm going to be asking you some questions. Your book is extremely descriptive about some things that happened in those moments immediately after Gary and Randy went down. You talk about the fact that in the movie it shows it. You're there, you're by yourself. The crowd of Somalis finds you, and then somebody knocks you out. Now, in your book, you talked about it in more detail. They were trying to rip your boots off. And then there's this really odd moment where they were stripping your clothes off, and then they almost felt embarrassed, you said, and they kind of put your clothes back on you. Do you recall that moment?
Absolutely. It was very weird. I mean, they're stripping all my stuff off. And, of course, one of the issues here is I've got a compound femur fracture. So when they're trying to get my boot off, my youngest played hockey. And when he was a kid, I always tied his skates and took his skates off. And every time I took his skates off, I thought about them trying to take my boot off.
Wow.
And because you never unlace it enough, right? And it's always going to be hard to get off. And at some point, my femur goes out the backside of my leg. And I believe it was because they were, again, just pulling on it, trying to get that boot off. And obviously going back and forth, and finally it just punches through the back of my leg. That's the only explanation for when that could have happened in my mind. Maybe it happened later, earlier, I'm not sure. But anyhow, I can't feel anything at that point anyway. It's just overwhelming pain across the whole body.
And we are back. This is JP here, filling in for Phil today on Rightside Radio, where it's always solid, conservative, and just plain right. 833-687-4448 is the text line number. Text us in your thoughts. Scotty Butcham will be coming in at the top of the hour. Next segment to be in studio the rest of the show. Phil is off today. He was not able to be in studio for the show, but he will be back tomorrow. So y'all make sure to stay tuned for that. We got Connor from Huntsville here on the text line. Said, hey, JP, Connor from Huntsville. I think a lot of these boomers at the No Kings rallies are just left over from the Woodstock generation, and the reason they hate Trump so much is they've been on a quest for 50 years, at least 60 years, some, to remake the United States, and they see one man who's able to, and hopefully this next 4 years, plus what he did the previous 4, absolutely overturned so many of their games, and it just infuriates them beyond reason. Well, man, that's y'all's generation, so you may be speaking it better than myself, but I think that is true. I think the sect of these baby boomers that were at the No King rally, I think you're correct. And the Woodstock generation, the folks who, the hippie generation, maybe, I guess they never outgrew that, and they're still miserable, and they didn't pass on any wisdom to their kids or grandkids if they even have any. So I think that's largely correct. But I feel bad for them. It's the demographic at any pictures you've seen has been the miserable boomer type. So you may be correct there. Sandy from Harvest says, I really enjoy it when you do the show, JP. Great job. Appreciate you, Sandy. And by the way, folks, to finish out the hour here, I just thought it'd be funny. Have y'all seen who's been making the rounds lately? It's been Karine Jean-Pierre, the gaslighter in chief. The former press secretary under the Biden administration has been making the rounds, saying some crazy stuff. Well, first, she claimed that Biden is giving more press than President Trump is right now. She's claiming that President Biden spoke to the American people even more than Trump is right now. She also is saying, she never saw any sign of cognitive decline with Joe Biden. And, he was always on his A game. Does she know she doesn't have to keep lying? Does she know that she's no longer on the payroll? She can just, she can tell the truth. But I believe she's making the rounds right now. She has a book coming out. It's called Independent, a look inside a broken White House. Okay, that's kind of like the pot calling kettle black here, because Karine Jean-Pierre was at the top of the list of people that were contributing to a broken White House. And now she's wanting to make the rounds and, I guess cover her tracks and say that, it wasn't on her. She was just there, doing her job. It's pretty crazy to see, and she was even on Stephen Colbert last night, where even Stephen Colbert, of all people, kind of had to press her a little bit about, saying what he saw was a cognitive decline under Biden, and it wasn't a conspiracy. It was visible. And that's why the Democratic Party had a coup and ousted Joe Biden and then had Kamala Harris come in. So even Stephen Colbert is holding Karine Jean-Pierre's feet to the fire. But it's funny because while she's making the rounds talking about a broken White House, she's then also saying that there was nothing wrong with the White House and that Joe Biden was always on his A game. So it's kind of hard to see which one it is. But like I said, she's no longer on the payroll. She can now just go off into shame and write her book and get her paycheck. But she no longer has to lie for Joe Biden. So I don't know if she's gotten that memo yet, but we'll see. We'll see if her book does well. Maybe she can join Kamala Harris on The View. I think that's the only job that she's going to have left. But Scotty Butcham actually just came into the studio. Do you want to go ahead and join in, Scott? We got about a minute left in the segment here.
I'm live now.
You are live now.
I'm trying to get situated over here and get some headphones on as well.
All good.
I was actually sitting in the parking lot listening to Megyn Kelly.
Were you?
Go off on that very subject. She had about a 14-minute piece, so I didn't have time to listen to all of it. But evidently, KJP went on Joe Scarborough this morning.
Did she?
And in the middle of the interview, started claiming, when she refers to the broken White House, she's talking about the current White House.
Oh, wow.
Megyn Kelly went off on her. Everybody should find that clip.
That is crazy. Yeah, right. The current Trump administration is the broken White House. And she also claimed that Biden spoke to the press more than Trump does.
But the title of the book is An Inside Look. Mm-hmm. She's certainly not an insider to the Trump White House. Come on.
She's an outsider look.
You know, we watched that pathological liar for 2 years?
At least, yes.
The book should be no surprise.
Exactly. Jeff from Indiana just texted in and said, JP, I'm wondering who's more in cognitive decline, Joe Biden or his press secretary? That's a good question.
Joe Biden's was unintentional.
That's
his was
true.
medical. Hers is the girl's committed to a lie like nobody I've ever seen.
It's unbelievable. But who knows? She'd fit right in on The View if they want to take her
she
in.
Would.
Well, we got about 30 seconds here, folks, and we'll be right back from this break. And Scotty Butcham will be in studio the rest of the show. And always a fun time with Scott. So y'all make sure to stay tuned. 833-687-4448. That is the text line or the call-in number. That's 833-68 right. Y'all let us know your thoughts here. Phil is out today, but he will be back tomorrow. So Scotty and I will have the show in the meantime. But we're going to take a quick time out. Like I said, this is Rightside Radio. We'll be right back.
Phil Williams here. I want to remind you that Inspire Advisors is one of our sponsors, and they are doing amazing work. Look, I know this audience. You're the kind of folks who believe in standing up for your principles. You're good stewards of your resources. But what if the companies you were investing in don't reflect your values at all? Well, that's why you need to meet Paul Breyer and his team at Inspire Advisors. Because Inspire Advisors, they are experts in the field of biblically responsible investing. They can help you grow your bottom line while also be proud of what companies you're investing in. Inspire Advisors, check them out. Their website, www.moneypatternwealth.com, and tell them you heard about it on Rightside Radio.
And then they're trying to get my survival gear off, and I used to make a joke about this. We didn't have regular survival gear that the regular Army units had. We had, we called it ninja gear, and it had buckles on it that are like a water ski vest, right? You have to squeeze
the fast text
little
buckles.
tangs together to get it to unbuckle. And I always used to say the Somalis don't water ski. So I actually had to help them get that off because, they're pulling and pulling and pulling. And I'm like, well, all right, I'll just undo the buckle. So I undid the buckle and they got it off. And they got me down to my brown T-shirt, which when you see the interrogation video, you can tell I've still got that on, and my desert tan trousers. Now, they were going for the trousers, but because it's very humid there and we weren't taking a lot of showers, our flight surgeon said, you're probably better off not wearing underwear because it keeps you a little bit drier. So I was not wearing underwear. And they start taking my trousers off. And again, this is the only explanation I can come up with. They realized that I'm about to be naked and changed their mind and stopped. And in the end, it had probably a benefit in that it provided a little bit of protection from the elements for that now open wound I had on my right leg. Otherwise it had been rubbing in the dirt. So again, just a whole bunch of little weird
crazy
things like
little
that.
surreal moments like that. Yeah. But one of the worst moments, and you said in your book, you actually had told yourself you were never going to tell that story until the book was actually put together later. You decided to do it. But at one point, one of the Somalis clubbed you with something, and later on, you remembered what it was. Do you mind talking about that?
Well, the reason, and here's the rationale. What happened at the crash site was unimaginable. I mean, I've been in combat before. I've seen people die before. I've been angry at the enemy before, but I never thought humans could do what they did. And I guess I wanted to protect the families of my comrades from knowing about this. So I sort of watered it down a little bit when I first talked about it, not knowing they're seeing bodies dragged through the streets. I didn't know that. I mean, it's on the front page of our newspaper at home. You know, the wife and kids of who we think is not conclusive evidence to indicate that it was one person versus another. There's probably three possibilities. But in their minds, that's dad, you know, or that's my husband. But I didn't know any of that. So I'm sort of trying to keep them from knowing that these horrific things happened. And then I get released and I see all this. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that this is already all out in the public domain. So that's when I decided, well, there's no harm in me telling what actually happened. And it was interesting to me that nobody had questioned it anyway, because if you got butt stroked, which is what I said was originally happened,
right,
with a rifle butt, hard enough to break your eye socket. I can still feel it right here. My eye socket was broken. My nose was broken, but there's no bruise. I mean, you're gonna bruise up if you get hit that hard by a rifle butt, right? And you can see in the interrogation video, there's no bruise.
right.
But no one ever questioned that, and that's because it wasn't a rifle butt. I mean, and the best I can tell, it was a body part. I mean, it was very heavy and soft, like flesh. And that's why I always thought, well, it's just probably
like the arm or
of,
leg
of someone. Yeah. I mean, that's the only explanation. But it was, again, hard for me to fathom that these people have turned so much against us. Because you mentioned George Bush earlier.
Yeah.
He visited Somalia before he left office.
Yeah.
And there were parades in the street for our presence there because we had brought stability. We had brought an end to the fighting. We had brought an end to the starvation. And they were big, big fans of the U.S. And here we are 10 months later, and they're doing this to us. I mean, you heard the quote, hearts and minds of the people. You can't lose the hearts and minds of the people any worse than that. I mean, that's as bad as it gets, to go from celebrating the fact that you're here to desecrating the remains of my comrades and you know, cutting people into pieces. I mean, it's just insane.
And desecrating the corpses. I mean, we saw a little bit of that in Baghdad. I mean, I wasn't there. I won't try to portray that I was, but I did have my team sergeant saw the images of, and it was one of his friends from back home hanging from a bridge. There's a different level of depravity, but you witnessed it firsthand, and I got to ask you. So when they clubbed you with the body part, did you know at the time that was what it was, or did you process it and see it later in your mind?
No, I think I suspected that that's what it was, and you know, I can't guarantee 100% that is what it was, but I'm relatively certain that it was. I just remember looking at the guy. I didn't cry out or anything. I just looked at, I probably with, you know, I was incredulous. I just couldn't believe that this could be happening at this point. It's just not something, you know, I guess I grew up watching sort of old school war movies, right? Where people still act like humans, you know, they're not, you know, at the level that these people were at that point. And I don't know.
Were they all chewing cotton? I mean, was this
probably?
Yeah. For those who don't know, is it a root or is it a leaf? What is it? But they chew it.
It looks like grass clippings almost. Actually, it comes in a little bundle because they brought some. There's a funny story about that in captivity, and I guess I'll tell it now. So
go ahead.
So I'm in captivity, and at this point, I've been with the same guy for a few days. Farimbi was his name, and I'm starting to know him a little bit. He's kind of a goofy dude. but he was pretty high up in Adid's organization, and he had been put in charge of my well-being, I'll say, making sure nobody else got me, essentially, or certainly didn't get rescued. And so he had 3 underling guards that sort of supported him. So the 4 of them are, making sure that nobody figures out where I am and that I've got some level of security. And one of them goes off somewhere and comes back and has caught. And they're right in the room with me. And they're dividing it up. And initially they make 4 piles. And then Frimby says, no. And he points to me like he needs his.
I was looking at before I came in the door. Was it Jean-Pierre?
Corinne Jean-Pierre, yeah.
Corinne Jean-Pierre. I always go by her initials.
As we call her, the gaslighter in chief.
I'm telling you, something else. And you and I was sharing with you that I was listening to Megyn Kelly just rip into her on an earlier interview today. And she played a little piece from her interview with Joe Scarborough this morning. Where about halfway through the interview, let's remind listeners, the name of the book is An Insider's Look at a Broken White House. Some point during the interview with Joe Scarborough, she shifted and started claiming she's talking about Trump's White House.
Yeah.
So
You're not the press secretary for this one.
Yeah, that's just bizarre. Hey, we've got a guest sitting on the phone. I want to get right to him, mainly because he and I never plan out these interviews. Representative Danny Garrett from Trussville. He is the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee on Education. And friends will occasionally hear me on the radio and they'll hear Danny because I drag him everywhere I go. And they'll say, did y'all plan all that out? And Danny, you're on the air now, but we don't plan it out, which is probably a mistake on our part.
We do not plan it out, and I'm actually at the beach. I have no idea what you're going to ask me, so I'm really probably walking into a trap.
I was really busy today, so I didn't have time to plan a trap, or I certainly would have. I did though think, as we were getting ready to come back on the air, there were 2 prime things I wanted to talk to you about, but you also may have something you want to talk about because you guys. You don't go into session for a little while yet, but you're already in the thick of conversations, committee meetings, a lot of planning is going on for the session. So if there's somewhere you want to go, feel free to just take the conversation there. I'd like to start with the latest on the situation with the AHSAA, what you're hearing from your colleagues. Kind of where do you feel like that is sitting right now? And do you have any idea what we can expect when you do get into session on that topic?
Well, I think that's just a mind-boggling situation. We tried to talk to the board and to their different other members and their leadership when they first began to raise the concern they had about the CHOOSE Act. Of course, what they've done, they basically declared the CHOOSE Act as financial aid, and that impacts the ability of kids who are utilizing the CHOOSE Act to go to a school to play sports, and that just was never the intent of the law. It's not financial aid. I mean, and the law specifically says it's not, but for some reason they are just not going to back off that stance. And of course, we've got lawsuits filed by the governor, the speaker, and there's an injunction and all that's going on. And they just kind of doubled and tripled down on their position. And I've not heard anyone within the legislature show any support or understanding of what they're thinking. I mean, I think at this point, there's always been a lot of tension between that organization and some of the legislators, but we've always worked through these. This one, I just don't know. I think that Lieutenant Governor feels very strong about the situation, and what they're doing is just not right. It's not fair, and it's violating the law. Right. I think they leave us no choice but to say, guys, we're going to take care of it. So I've not found anyone in Montgomery that I've spoken with that has shown any support at all for their position.
Yeah, and to reiterate your earlier point, the CHOOSE Act, the CHOOSE Act doesn't just say this can't be used to in regards to eligibility. It calls AHSAA out by name and says, you cannot do this. That the audacity of an organization that is split off from the Alabama Department of Education. I mean, it's a separate entity, but all of their funding is derived from the people they're flipping the finger at. How do they
every
expect
event they
this
have
to
is on
end?
public school property or private school property or property that we're funding, and I don't understand it. The media is trying to make this as if the legislature is wanting to open up NIL and unbridled transferring among all the schools. That's not at all. In fact,
No.
the provision we add in the law just says this is not going to circumvent any of their rules regarding bona fide moves or anything like that. So it's just, I don't know. I think that when you get down to the bottom of it, some people within an organization do not like the Choose Act.
Right,
They don't like
right.
the scope of it. They don't like. They have issues with private schools, and they don't like where we're going, and so they just said we're going to make a rule, and so you guys have to do what we say, and I think we're going to find out.
And we do know that all of this is being handed down by their central board, which is made up, what is it, about 9 members, Danny, something like that?
I think there's 15 members.
15.
I think there's only 2 coaches on that board.
That's
I think
right.
most of the members are, the majority of the largest group of members are superintendents. But they've got other people that I don't know why they're on the board. I don't understand their rationale.
Right.
They have no accountability, no oversight. Good luck trying to get a financial statement to figure out what everybody gets paid. I mean, they're just putting. I think they forced us to. We're going to have to just start taking this issue on, and I think there's a resolve to do that.
I don't think you're going to have a choice. As Senator Elliott refers to them, and you and I went over the list of people on the central board. You mentioned there was a private school coach, public school coach. One of them, I think the private school coach has been retired for years. So he's not active. The rest, as Senator Elliott would refer to them, are educrats. Superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals. And we know, because you and I, you sponsored the Choose Act. I've been probably your biggest hemorrhoid over the Choose Act for 2 years, or over school choice, I should say, screaming and yelling about it. But you and I both know there are a couple of names on that central board that were very outspoken against school choice and wanted no part of it, didn't want the legislature to pass it.
Right. Yeah.
Do you feel like this is kind of a backslap to the legislature for passing school choice?
Yeah, I think they feel like this is a way they can just, control what we do. But it's just not going to work this time. And I think they've opened up Pandora's box, and I think everything's out there. I mean, there's all these anecdotal issues that people have with them, and most of the time they involve their positions or rulings they've made that are really, any fair-minded person would say that's not fair, that's not right to a particular situation or child. And there's plenty of those examples. And I think, now all that's kind of piled up, but now we just got an organization that's pretty much saying, yeah, we know you wrote the law, yeah, we know you passed the law, yeah, we know what the law says, but we don't care. Our rules trump the law, any law you got.
Well,
and that's just crazy to me.
I want to follow up with their next step as well, Danny, because I think the public needs to know exactly what is going on here, exactly how this is played out. The lieutenant governor, no, it wasn't the lieutenant governor, Speaker of the House and the governor had to file an injunction, or requested an injunction from a judge to stop them from keeping kids on the sideline, because their kids had been suspended. They'd been told you can't participate this year.
Like a week before the season started.
A week before the season.
Yeah.
And so they're losing practice time. They only get so many games. And from what I remember, these are 7th and 8th graders. You may only play 6 games in middle school. But so this is going on. The judge does issue the injunction at the request of the governor and the speaker. And then you found out some information that AHSAA were notifying these schools, okay, the judge says these players are ineligible and you've got to let them play. But we're telling you, if we get this reversed down the road, you're going to forfeit those games if you go ahead and play them.
That's what I've heard. They've not told me that directly, but I've heard it from more than one person, a reliable source. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you see even one of the comments of one of the lawsuit members that's what they were saying was that, yeah, well, you got this injunction, but just know that if we prevail in court, we're going to make you forfeit those games. That's just typical of their strategy. I mean, we're talking about we're talking about high school, middle school sports, letting kids
Yeah.
participate. And they want to go down this road. And, I don't get it, but we'll find out.
Yeah, we're in the find out phase, so we'll move into that when the session starts. There is quite a unified front. You mentioned that earlier in terms of the governor's office, the speaker's office, the lieutenant governor. You've got Senate members that are outspoken about it. Danny, I even noticed some Democrats who were absolutely not in favor of the Choose Act. They've got an issue with the way AHSA is handling this.
Yeah, I've had several of them tell me that yeah, because this is beyond that. This is just them flexing what they believe is their unlimited authority, and that's just. I think we're to the point now that everybody's gonna have their say, and legislature, I think, is united as a united front on this, and certainly the executive branch. And so we'll see.
Unfortunately for the AHSA, only legislators get to vote on this. So we'll see how this plays.
And I'll say this too, that there was a big legislative conference in Birmingham this summer. And of course, with the whole college athletics changing, and all states are dealing with school choice and virtual schools and home schools and micro schools, all things is changing landscape. It was brought up not by the state of Alabama at this meeting, but by several other states that they were having issues with their high school athletic associations who were not open to the evolving landscape and making adjustments.
Right.
So I think this issue is not only going to be limited to Alabama. I think you're going to see it in other states as well.
Well, no surprise that an organization or a group that has pretty much had a monopoly on kids for a long time, they're losing that because legislators have decided, you know what, we're going to let parents make education decisions for their children. And the folks that did not really have to compete with that are now going to have to compete. But that was part of your goal with the school choice to create competition. JP's trying to tell me about how long we've got before break.
We'll probably go to break.
It's time to go to break now. Yeah. All right, we're good. Danny, can you hang on through this break?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to break real quick. We'll be back with Representative Danny Garrett. I want to get the latest on the online sales tax, plus whatever Representative Garrett wants to share about the upcoming session. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
All right. So I'm not saying anything. I'm just going to see how this plays out. And now they make 5 piles. So he gives one to each of these 3 underling guys, and they take off. He throws a bundle to me. When the other 3 guys leave the room, I throw my bundle back to him. So he ends up getting a double rack, basically. And he just big old smile on his face. And he ends up, again, I don't know really what the effects of this stuff are, but he ends up with what seemed to be a hangover after he consumed all of this. But it was, I don't want to say I had some kind of grand strategy here, but common sense will tell you if you can build a rapport with somebody who has control over your destiny, that's probably a good thing. I guess this is what people that resist law enforcement don't understand.
He's the guy that you said was clean cut and wearing, linen slacks.
No, that's not for him.
That's not him.
That's Abdi.
Okay.
Yeah, he was like the minister of public relations or something. Abdi was. Yeah, okay. But Farimbi's a little bit lower level guy, but it basically I won him over. And in fact, once the Red Cross ultimately visits me, they come out describing what they call the reverse Stockholm syndrome. Stockholm syndrome is when, as a prisoner, you start to sympathize with your captors. They called it the reverse Stockholm syndrome, where my captors were sympathizing with me.
Oh, okay.
And again, that's probably just one of the things that I had tried to do to build that rapport. Again, I'm trying to buy time, right? If there's a rescue that comes, is Farimbi going to put a gun to my head and pull the trigger immediately, or is he going to think, I've gotten to know this guy a little bit. He's kind of a good guy. Do I really need to do this? Just that 5-second delay maybe saved my life, right? So that's what I'm trying to do.
I remember you said too in the book that your survival, escape, resistance, evasion, your SEER instructors had told you one of the first rules is don't piss off your captors.
Right.
So, well, the opposite of piss them off is develop some rapport.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of which, obviously you're going through it right now. You're going through everything that SEER talks about, with the exception of you can't be mobile to try and escape and evade. But nonetheless, were you able to draw from anything with the SEER course? Was it beneficial?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Tell me how.
100%. I mean, if I had not been to SEER school, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, you learn outside of survival school, big four, nothing more, right? Name, rank, service number, date of birth, right? That's it. Yeah. That's impossible. We learned that in Vietnam. I mean, because there was no survival school for most of the people who were held in Vietnam. And one of the things that got fixed after that is for certain organizations, there was a survival school stood up. Colonel Nick Rowe was a big advocate of all that. And if you've never read his book, which I read early on in my career, you can't, I mean, you could maybe do it for 15 minutes, but if you're being held for weeks or months or even days, saying nothing but the big four and nothing more it doesn't work. Right. So that's all I would have had if I had not gone to survival school. And in survival school, they teach you, okay, here are some things that you can do that go beyond that worked like a charm. It's funny, you made a mention earlier about how you never really understood warrant officers. Well, actually, that became a benefit for me in captivity because they're asking me, what rank are you? And I said, I'm a warrant officer. And they're like, what's a warrant officer? Obviously they're not saying it quite that well, but, a warrant officer. And I tried to do just what you did. I said, Lieutenant, General, Sergeant, warrant officer, right? And I'm trying to show them where I fit. Yeah. In the end, they never got it. But what's happening? We're wasting time. And that's one of the things they teach you to do, right?
Yeah.
Just kill time. If you can kill time and they're not getting to the things that really matter, then you're winning this battle. So, going through these long explanations about what a warrant officer is helping me. In the end, they never got it. And in the letters that they wrote to me after the fact, they called me a colonel. They've settled on the fact.
They wrote you letters after the fact?
Oh yeah. I should have brought them actually. I wasn't thinking when I left home this morning, but I got a letter from Adid, I got a letter from Farimbi, and I got a letter from the doctor who treated me.
Okay, now I got to chase that rabbit. So what are they asking you for sponsorship?
Well,
they send you birthday greetings? What are they doing?
So Adid's was the typical political letter, like I saved your life.
Please remember me favorably.
Yeah. Farimbi's was exactly what I would have thought it was based on building that rapport. He's like, I hope you're doing well. Glad that you were reunited with your family, all of that.
Wow.
And it was
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. I'm Scott Buttram, sitting in for Phil Williams. On the line with me is Representative Danny Garrett. Danny, I don't want to keep you long. You're at the beach. Do you have the whole family there, or is it just you?
Just Carol and me.
Just you and Carol.
Carol and me. Yeah.
Man, that's a treat.
It is. Yeah. we miss all the family, and we end up talking about all of our grandkids. How about that?
But you don't have to buy dinner for 40. You don't have to buy dinner for 40 people when it's just you and Carol. So that's a good thing. And I don't want to take away from your beach time. I do want to talk a little bit about the online sales tax. I know that's an issue that will be coming up. Cities have concern with the disbursement and just the way the whole thing is handled. You and I've talked. There are a lot of moving parts here. It's not all going to get resolved in this session, but you did have feel pretty good about maybe being able to deal with some of the app loopholes. Are you still optimistic about that?
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue. It's got multi layers to it.
Yeah.
if you want to start with the standpoint that the online tax is less than the tax of the brick and mortar, there's a way to equalize that, but that would require a tax increase, and that's not going to happen,
Right.
anytime soon. The other thing is that would really solve the problem, because as long online sales grow, you're going to continue to have that issue down the road,
Right.
as people opt for online versus going to the brick and mortar. So that issue is one issue you got to deal with. But when you're talking about these apps, there are some loopholes that I think we can address. Those are easily addressed. I think most people would agree that would be fair to address those.
Yeah.
I would expect we would look at those. So if you use an app to buy groceries, pick it up, you shouldn't get less tax. And if you call in or you go pick it up at the same store, those type of things. The issue you get into though is really what they really want to do is how do we allocate the money that's collected. And of course, the state gets 4%, which is the second lowest sales tax in the country. The county gets their piece. The cities get their piece. And the concern is, of course, that the cities, who depend so much on that sales tax revenue, are seeing their revenue decline because of the increase in online purchases. And many cities believe they are getting the short end of the stick. So if you got a city that thinks they're losing $5 million, that means you got another group that thinks, well, if you take it away, I'm going to lose my $5 million.
Right.
So
Right.
there's ways to get to some solution. But I think when you look, like even in my district, I've got 3 cities.
Mm-hmm.
One of them believes they're coming on the short end of the stick. The other 2 are kind of neutral. They don't really have a strong position. I think when you look at how you fix this, you got to count how many noses you have in the state house that are on the winning side and the losing side. And I'm not sure. I think you may have a lot of people that like it just the way it is because they're in areas that they feel like they're getting a benefit from the current formula.
Right.
So I think that is a more difficult issue. I think it's certainly resolvable, and I think there's some way to kind of meet somewhere in the middle or address that. But that's going to require discussions, of course, with the executive branch and the Senate and House leadership and others, and the counties. And nobody wants to give up anything, but I think ultimately there's a solution to that. That's a little more complicated though. But I think closing these loopholes early on is something we should easily do. I've heard very little pushback on that.
Good. Well, I think we've got to start making progress on it. And as you said, there are a lot of layers. Danny, with about 30 seconds to go, just anything you want to address about the upcoming session?
Well, I think this is the Governor Ivey's last session, so I'm meeting with her folks next week, and to find out kind of what their thoughts are about what they would like to do on the way out. I think that we know the budgets are kind of stabilized, and education budget's in pretty good shape. General fund's going to have some challenges down the road, but I think that we'll be it's an election year, and I think people are going to be wanting to get in and get out pretty quick. So I would expect it to be all together a smooth session, maybe a quick session, and not too much controversy is what I'm expecting.
We would be very disappointed on the media side, but I kind of hope you're right. Danny, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. That was Danny Garrett, Representative Danny Garrett from Trussville. I'm Scott Buttram, sitting in for Phil Williams. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. You stay with us.
In their native language, and then but I have both copies. I have the English translation and then the original. And then they asked me if I would become basically an intermediary between them and the American people.
Them personally or them Somalia?
Somalia.
Wow.
And it was too soon. I mean,
yeah,
I just said there is so much anger, so much pain. I can't stand up and say, these are not bad people, and a lot of them are not bad people. The reality is it's like any other population. There's bad people, and, they're the ones that get the attention, and there's people that are just caught in the middle of it all. And I said,
so you wrote them back?
I actually wrote Farimbi. This is the only one I wrote back. And I basically just said, hey, I appreciate what you did, because you did things for me that I'm not sure I would have done, actually, because I got sick a couple times, and he helped clean me up. But they asked me, and the way they asked me is they set up a meeting with me and an envoy from the Somali government in Nashville. And I went to the unit and I said, hey, these guys are reaching out to me. What do I need to do here? And they said, well, just don't do anything stupid. And I said, am I violating any rules here? And they said, no, not as far as we could tell. I'm like, okay. So I did my typical James Bond thing. I got there early. I got up on a higher level and I'm watching just to see, how's this all going to play out? And this guy shows up and he's
just you by yourself?
Yeah,
place?
by myself.
All right,
yeah,
wow.
Alone and unafraid in a public place. And this guy shows up and obviously a Somali. I mean, they have a very unique bone structure. I could spot a Somali pretty much anywhere, and it's just because of their ancestry and the various cultures that have matured into who they are today. But anyway, he shows up and he's in traditional garb, so that's kind of a help in Nashville. And he sits down at the table, and I wait a few minutes, and I'm looking around, and he's not acting nervous. He's not like looking anywhere. I don't see anybody else that looks suspicious. Yeah. And then I decide, okay, I'll go down there. So I go down there, and this is when he gave me the letters. And then he gave me a T-shirt, which I still have, like the most rudimentary. What is it called when you make T-shirts?
Like screen printing?
Yes, rudimentary screen printing job you've ever seen in your life. That had a picture of a Somali flag and a U.S. flag, and then a Caucasian hand and an African-American hand shaking hands on the front, that this is what they want me to do, right?
It was probably given to them by PSYOPs back in the day.
I guess.
Because we had those same things in Baghdad. We had all the leaflets with the flags and the hands, and it was all a PSYOP stuff.
Yep. And I'm like, okay.
We had T-shirts too.
And he said, was there anything we can do for you? And I said, well, one of the wives asked if there's any way we get a wedding ring back. And I said, I'll put it on you guys. If you could get that ring back, that would mean a lot. They never found it. I mean, our stuff just got scattered. In fact, Adid's son ends up wearing my ID tags later on in his career, and he brags about it. I think he said he had my AIM-9 pistol and a couple other things. I mean, they just took all our stuff.
Wow.
No way to get it all back.
Wow. Okay, I had never heard the letter thing.
The letter part. I should have brought him actually.
Yeah. That's some madness right there. That's some brass on their part too, to be honest. I mean,
and that's the last time I ever heard from him. I wrote Frimby a letter. He's probably no longer with us because he was a little bit older. I mean, it's been 30 years.
I got to ask you too. I was reviewing your book last night, getting ready for today, and watching a few of your interviews and things, and just kind of refreshing myself on some of the story. And one of the things I did not recall was you said at one point during your captivity that it sounded like the battle with the Rangers was getting really close to where you were. Like it was like you were thinking they were coming to rescue you, but it was really just a battle passing by.
First night. I mean, the battle's still going, because the Battle of Mogadishu starts at about 3:30 in the afternoon. That's when we hit the target, and it doesn't end till the next morning. So that first night, I'm in captivity, and it's probably the convoy. Eventually, we got support from the Pakistanis, the Malaysians, and the 10th Mountain Division.
Right.
They all created a convoy because we didn't have armored vehicles. So we had to.
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. I'm Scott Butford from the Trussville Tribune. I'm sitting in for Phil Williams today. JP's in the studio with me. He's going to join me a little bit in this segment. And JP, I'm also getting an emergency text from my daughter requesting gas money. So
that's always good.
I'm over here Venmoing as we talk. I don't know if she's sitting at a pump or not. So
That's funny.
We've covered a little bit with Danny Garrett, and I guess it was the second hour of the show. Got a recap on the situation with the AHSAA. There was a private school meeting. I think, was it last weekend or weekend before last?
It was last week.
Okay. And it was clear that Director Heath Harmon was trying to, get the private schools on board to support their cause. Yeah, that's got to be a hard sell right off the bat. Look, we've broken the law. a law that specifically told us not to break this law.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're going to court over it, and we really need you guys on our side. We're really sorry we've been treating you like stepchildren for the last 50 years. Will you join us?
Yeah.
That had to go over like a lead balloon
It's like,
in the room.
Oh, guys, listen, if you could just give us some air cover, we'd really appreciate it. It's like, no, why would we do that? But also, the private schools have everybody on their side, from the governor to the lieutenant governor to the speaker of the house, and the injunction, that granted the players can play, in the meantime, while they figure it out long-term, like everything is pointing towards that the private schools are going to win in this. So why would they change anything what they're doing?
Right.
Why would they give the AHSA any help?
Well, and the bottom line is this: the Choose Act put the ball in the parents' court.
Yeah.
Now it's mama and daddy's decision, not the state and the state public schools decision. Life is going to change for private schools. Life is going to change for public schools. You've also got a certain segment of public schools that are going to be totally ineffective. They're giving a great education. They've got great facilities. They've got great programs. They're not worried about kids leaving for any reason because of the opportunities they could provide. But a lot of public schools have never had to do that before.
Yeah.
Your kid just had to come here, period, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah.
So it's a different ballgame now. I grew up a private school kid.
So did I.
And I love that side. My wife just retired from 30 years in the public school classroom. So we got a great love for public schools as well. But the bottom line is public schools have really mistreated private schools that play in the AHSAA. That's why a lot of them choose not to. Mm-hmm. The more successful a private school is in the AHSAA, they're literally penalized for success
because of the multiplier.
Right.
They got, if they do well, then they got to multiply up to play at a higher class, when the public schools don't have to do that. But also the public schools, on their board of 15, he said there's only one representative for private schools. That's right. And it's
Terry Curtis from UMS, and he's been retired for 10 years now.
Exactly. So the public schools actually get a lot on their favor. And I know in the meeting it was brought up that Gulf Shores just got a $53 million facility with state tax dollars that private schools don't have access to stuff like that. So I think the HSA, for some reason, is scared to make it look like they're giving private schools any little bit of ground in favor, where they actually go too far the other side. And they actually penalize the private schools. So
and let's talk about why they penalize. Why did they put that penalty in place? And the private schools know this, because public schools have always assumed private schools are cheating.
Yeah, exactly.
Private schools are recruiting. Private schools are getting by on shoestring budgets. I told you I was K through 12 in a private school. It looked like a collection of warehouses. I did not have a window in a classroom from 7th grade until I graduated. The building didn't have windows.
Yeah.
But we had a great environment, we got a great education. So it's kind of interesting to watch after public schools have looked down their noses at private schools all these times. All these years, they need them as an ally. I don't think they're going to be a very vocal ally.
No, I don't think so either. Especially with everybody that's on the private school side. Like I said, they got all the help they need from Ivy and Ainsworth. So I think they'll win in this.
Right. And the private schools also know where the real cheating's going on.
Exactly.
You're not going to fool them. They know who's cheating.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not them.
It's the public schools. I mean, and there may be some in private schools, I'm sure, but it pales in comparison to the public side.
And really, the entire cheating, what we're referring to as recruiting, that's what the allegation always is. I don't know how many in the general public have actually read the rules on recruiting and what is legal and what is not. It's a very, very narrow rule.
Yeah.
It basically says your coaches, your faculty and staff cannot go recruit players. It doesn't keep players from recruiting players. It doesn't keep parents from recruiting players. It doesn't keep a local businessman that wants to see this school do well from paying somebody's rent to move to another school district. So there's cheating going on, but it in all honesty, it is probably very rarely from the school itself, but somebody representing that school.
But it was at the point of like when I was in high school, that when kids would transfer to a new area and for a private school, like the HSAA would like have to have pictures taken to make sure
Right.
that kids have moved in to like furniture has been moved into their new places. Like, what do we like? This is like the mafia. Like, it's
No, you're right.
relax, guys. You know, it's high school
right.
sports. I mean, I know it's just, I don't know. Phil likes to call them the sports mafia, which I think is very fair because that's how they act.
That is how they act.
Yeah.
And no, you're right about that. Every public school has this. If someone, especially if it's an athlete, there's no question you've got to go through this process. If you move in to a new school district, you're right. They have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt there's been a bona fide move.
Yeah.
I happen to know the person that used to handle that for Trustful. I think he's retired now, but he had to go inside the house. He had to ask them, open your child's closet. Let me make sure there are clothes in the closet. Open the drawers. Let me see there are clothes in the drawers. So they have verified, I think, probably from both sides, private or public, they verified bona fide moves. They do that. What they can't control and what they're not able to do anything about is that parent that meets another parent at a 7-on-7 camp during the summer and tells him how great his kid would do if they were at school XYZ.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're interested, I can help find you a job and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's happening. It's going on. I don't necessarily think it's organized by the schools, but I don't necessarily think it's discouraged by the schools either. So we'll see how all of that plays out. You were talking about a subject that was interesting to me when I came in, and that is, we talked about Karine Jean-Pierre, or is that right?
Yep. Karine Jean-Pierre.
Did I get it right that time?
Yeah.
And
KJP.
the way KJP, that's what I know. The way she misled as the White House spokesperson for all those years. So it's no surprise to see her on a book tour doing it. But just taking that to another level, JP, and what we're hearing in the press from elected officials right now during this government shutdown, has the truth just taken a holiday? You hear Schumer and then you hear Thune talking about the same exact event in total opposites. And you and I lean conservatively, so naturally we think Thune's being far more truthful than Schumer, right? Because Thune is being far more truthful than Schumer. But is this where we are today as a society, that we're just electing people to go to Washington and outlie each other?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think whatever is politically advantageous for whoever is talking on a matter, they're going to just say what it is. And like, for example, I know when Jeffries was talking to the media, he actually was talking to CNN, and CNN asked him, well, have you talked, when was the last time he talked to Mike Johnson? And Jeffries said, President Trump hasn't granted Mike Johnson permission to talk to me. And then the anchor said, well, have you gone down the hall and tried to talk to him? And he just goes, well, no, but it's not even worth it if I did, because he wouldn't talk to me anyways. It's like they have their lines and they have their talking points, and they just regurgitate those talking points. So then they can go to the No Kings rallies and stand up in front of everybody and say that, we're taking a stand, but it's just political theater. And it's primary. I mean, it happens on the right too, to a certain extent, but mainly on the left, especially with the government shutdown. Because this is the same CR that they voted for earlier this year, the same one they voted for 14 times. They only have an issue with it now that Trump's in office, but they're not going to tell you that part of it. But unfortunately, I think that whatever is politically helpful, the truth can take a back burner, because the truth, doesn't help most of the time.
Jeffries is not good at this. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
He is really not good at this.
No.
How was he selected as the minority leader for the Democratic Party?
I don't know. I think they just saw him as some young buck that could regurgitate talking points, but he's not even good at that.
No.
Like he just, it looks like he doesn't even have a soul. There's like nothing behind his eyes. He looks like a mortician. But then Cory Booker is kind of the same way, just a little bit more flamboyant and energetic. Like, he's not very great either.
Well, you could almost see a little emotion somewhere buried with Booker. We know it's fake because he goes into these diatribes that are clearly rehearsed.
Yeah.
But I'm just, we talked a lot about how shallow their bench was.
Yeah.
When they were looking for a presidential candidate. Actually, the last two elections they were looking, it was clear that there was a very, very shallow bench on the Democrat side. I wonder if Jeffries is just a beneficiary of he's the best they've got at a time when they don't have anybody very good.
Well, I think actually the person who is ruling the Democratic Party is AOC right now. I think she's calling the shots. And the thing with AOC is her policies are awful. She lies through her teeth constantly. Yeah. But at least I think she's authentic in terms of that is who she is. Whereas Jeffries and Booker and Schumer, they're saying what AOC is telling them to say.
Right.
Where AOC is actually that radical and actually that ridiculous. So I think AOC is the one telling them what to say.
I agree with that's a great description. She is authentic.
Yeah.
I'm not sure she understands anything she's saying.
No.
But she's authentic.
She's authentically stupid.
Means it. Yeah, she's authentically stupid. I don't think this should surprise anybody. Think about what we saw in 2016. When it finally came out that the Democrats rigged the primaries against Bernie.
Yeah.
They didn't want Bernie in there.
No.
They wanted Hillary to get her chance.
Yeah.
They cut off money to him. They rigged the primaries to work against him. He actually had the more emotional movement
he did.
in that primary.
He was the populist on the left.
He was.
And they did the same thing to RFK this past time. They ostracized him. So they have their way of picking who they want to. I mean, the establishment on the left, there's definitely an establishment on the right.
Right.
But Trump kind of was like the coup against that. Whereas the left, they're still the establishment is still running the left.
Well, we've got Jeff Poor joining us at 4. We may get into this. I was on Jeff's show earlier this morning, and we talked about it a bit. You're familiar with Kyle Whitmire and his term Alabamification. I don't think when he coined that term that he had any idea. He was actually describing the Democrats.
Yeah.
Because everything we see playing out with the Democratic Party nationally has already played out in Alabama, going back to 1986, when the Democrats did not like the Democrat nominee for governor that the people had voted for, and went into their executive committee, went in and removed him as the Democrat, as the nominee, and replaced him with Bill Baxter. That was Charlie Graddick. And the Alabama Democratic Party, who had a complete monopoly for 150 years, started falling apart from that moment. And, I got to live through it and see all that all the way up to 2010 when they were suddenly the party on the outside looking in.
And now we may be seeing it on the national level.
We are. I think when we look at what the national Democrats did to the Alabama Democrats about 4 years ago over leadership in the Alabama Democratic Party, that is playing out again on the national scene, and it failed miserably in Alabama, and they still went ahead and did it nationally, and I think they're going to have the same results.
It would be nice if they don't regroup. I just worry about somebody get more radical coming in and leading the charge for the reunification of the left.
Yeah, well, New York says, hey.
Yeah, exactly.
That may be coming this way now. One of the things that I have kind of been keeping an eye on, and we may end up talking about this in our last segment. I want to talk about the woke mind virus in corporate America. I don't think it's gone anywhere. And I think that's where all this started, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's take a quick break. I'm Scott Buttram, sitting in for Phil Williams here at Rightside Radio. Stay with us. JP and I'll be right back after this break.
Armored vehicles from the Pakistanis and the Malaysians. And that took hours to make all that happen through embassies and everything else, right? And I think that's what passed right by me, because I could hear, I'm thinking it's 40 millimeter rounds. You can hear it actually going through the air, and then a fairly big explosion. It could have been RPGs, because I've not been around RPGs when they're fired on the ground, so I don't know what they sound like, but I have been around, Mark 19s and 40 millimeters and kind of know what that sounds like. But it was, that type of weapon, and it's the explosions in the walls, and I hear this convoy going by and large volumes of fire, and I'm like, I don't know how they found me, but they found me, and here they come. And then
morale spiked for a few minutes.
Fades away into the darkness.
God almighty.
Yeah. Kind of.
Well, so you were held for what, 11 days? 11 days. When did you know that you were actually going home? Like, what? How did it come? How did you get the word that you're being set free and we're turning you back over to the Americans?
So, President Clinton finally did one thing right. He sent Robert Oakley, former ambassador to Somalia, over to settle all this, right? I think when Robert Oakley first came over, not all the remains had been turned over. I was still in captivity, and it was just a mess. And they really respected Robert Oakley.
How about that?
I mean, as soon as his name came on the radar, the whole tone changed. They didn't like the current folks that were in charge. In fact, Admiral Howe, they called him Animal Howe. They didn't like him at all. And I've always said, if we had 1,000 Robert Oakleys in this world, we'd probably have 1,000% less of the problems that we have.
Okay.
Just real solid statesmen that know how to build relationships with our partners and our adversaries, and diffuse situations and not make them worse. That's a skill that's probably pretty unique, but he certainly had it. And their whole tone changed. I mean, in fact, they called him a shoot straighter. They said, shoot straighter.
Shoot straighter.
Yeah, and I knew what they meant. And he met with, because he's since passed away, but I met with him 2 or 3 times afterwards. And he I hope I'm not getting too far off your question here.
No,
But
you're fine.
He basically said, and he went in without armed security. He went in with one other person, no weapons, to meet with the Somalis. And he said, you got 2 choices. You either let him go unconditionally or you don't. And if you don't, we're going to come find him eventually, and we're going to bring everything we got. And when Robert Oakley said that, the carrier battle group was back. We got fixed-wing aircraft back on the airfield. The AC-130s are back. I think we brought in 10,000 troops. I mean, it was a huge show of force. So we had not only his credibility, but he had a show of force behind him. And the Somalis had damage control to do, because I think one thing that people miss is that, yeah, it's horrible what happened, but it also negatively affected the Somalis from a global perspective. People are looking at them as, these people are
Savages.
savages,
Yeah.
right? Why would we want to do anything other than eliminate them? And so they knew they had damage control to do. So they're smart people. They understand the politics of all this. They understand how to control the media, all these things that we probably don't give them enough credit for. They realized it's in our best interest to let him go. And they did, within 48 hours of that meeting with Robert Oakley. I didn't really, another thing they teach you in school is don't get your hopes up too high, because it's really easy for things to fall apart. Yeah. And then emotionally,
You're not home till you're home.
You're devastated. Yeah. So I the rumblings started happening that, hey, I'm going to get released, but I just it's another day. I just got to get through another day. And I was actually sleeping when this Nigerian prisoner was brought in to my room, and that dude was happy. I mean, I think he had been like chained to a wall for a long period of time, because he was not injured. And he obviously got word that he was being released as well. And then a Red Cross doctor came in, and when I think I finally thought this is probably real is when he gave me the morphine, because he had morphine. And up to that point, I'd been all they had was aspirin. They had nothing else. And at that point, I realized, okay, if they're giving me morphine, that something probably is going to happen. And then it was bizarre. All I can think of is Coming to America, Eddie Murphy. These 3 dignitaries from Kenya, somewhere else, all come in with their traditional garb. They're drinking tea in the room, celebrating this release. And then they show up with a litter, put me on it, and take me out in the street. And the media is already all out there. That's why it was all broadcast live on TV. They already got the word that, hey, he's being released, and they're out there.
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. I'm Scott Butford from the Trussville Tribune, sitting in for Phil Williams today. JP's across the desk, keeping me straight. We're waiting on our next guest to be after the top of the hour. Jeff Poore will join us. JP and I, in the meantime, have been trying to resolve all the ills of the world.
We're getting there. We're chipping away.
You think we're making any progress? Do we have any texts coming in?
We do,
I haven't
actually.
paid much attention. Do we need to talk to somebody?
We got a couple. I can read a couple here. So Jeff from Moulton texted in. He said, I can give you a great reason why the Choose Act is not a good thing for athletes and their families. I had at Hoover High, when my son pitched baseball, told me they would find us a house and find me a job, the whole 9 yards, just so he could pitch for them. It's all about loading up teams that can't be beat. Masson Academy is the same way. Hartselle High, also Muscle Shoals. So this guy's a little jaded on this Chuzak.
Well, I'm not sure what the Choose Act has to do with any of that, unless that's a recent offer since the Choose Act passed. Is that what he's suggesting?
I think he's probably had that past experience, and he probably sees the Choose Act as a way for schools to use that. But Hoover is a public school, so not even a private school.
Yeah, and I would say this: as long as there are competitions, there's going to be cheating. It didn't start because of the Choose Act, and in fact, I think the Choose Act could level the playing field considerably, because kids now have an option. They don't have to rely on an offer, right? Mm-hmm. Their parents can get that money. But I understand being a little jaded, especially if you had a son that was kind of thrown in the middle of it. I get that. But this was going on long before we had school choice in Alabama, and it will continue as long as adults are involved in kids' sports.
We also got Sam from Priceville. Interesting question. He just said, how do we collect our cities that have 3 different zip codes? You can live in Priceville city limits and have a Hartselle, Somerville, or Decatur zip code.
That's a question that comes up a lot, and I've asked that question. It's a good one. The simple solution is tax maps and they don't use zip code maps to determine how taxes are distributed. They use tax maps. So they're following the city limits in cases like that. And I will also say to that listener, this is a fairly common thing, okay? Because city limits almost never match up with zip codes. So that's a hoop that cities had to jump through a long time ago. They can't base collections just on zip codes. I can give you an example of that. One of Trussville's biggest shopping centers has a Birmingham zip code. Now, you have to watch it, because Trussville did go into a few businesses to find out why they were not remitting their sales taxes, and they showed them a business license from the city of Birmingham. Birmingham had written them a city license instead of saying, no, you're not in our city limits. They went ahead and gave them a license. So that had to be adjusted. But this is something cities have had to deal with for a long time. Those two lines just don't match up, so they follow the city limits.
We got one more here with about 30 seconds left. Joe in Tennessee says, Corrine was known as the Notebook. The Notebook itself had all the lies in it, and the DNC wanted her to spread. Biden had cognitive dementia. KJP had political dementia. Glad she is gone.
I cannot add or take away from that. That was about as good a statement as we'll hear today. That was solid. Yes.
That was good.
I completely agree with that. So do we know where Phil is today? Do we know what Phil's doing? Has he told anybody, or did he just disappear?
It's top secret, but we'll say it's something cool. Hopefully we can tell the audience someday soon, but we cannot say.
I hope so, since I pre-wrote the story.
All right, here comes the music.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. JP's here with Scott Buttram from the Trussville Tribune. We're both filling in for Phil. It takes 2 to replace the Colonel.
Hey folks, Bill Williams here. I want to remind you that Inspire Advisors is one of our sponsors, and they are doing amazing work. Look, I know this audience. You're the kind of folks who believe in standing up for your principles. You're good stewards of your resources. But what if the companies you were investing in don't reflect your values at all? Well, that's why you need to meet Paul Breyer and his team at Inspire Advisors. Because Inspire Advisors, they are experts in the field of biblically responsible investing. They can help you grow your bottom line while also be proud of what companies you're investing in. Inspire Advisors, check them out. Their website, www.moneypatternwealth.com, and tell them you heard about it on Rightside Radio. That is a wild story. And the details of it, are they still pretty fresh?
Yeah. I mean,
you're
I don't volunteer to talk about it, but if I'm asked to talk about it, I talk about it. And so that's been about 1,000 times. And so I'm sure there's a few things that I'm probably losing focus on, but I think I pretty much remember all of it.
There was a scene in the movie with a little bird flying overhead while you're still in captivity, broadcasting over a loudspeaker, Mike Durant, "We will not leave you behind." Was that accurate?
It's accurate in that I heard it. That's what they said, but it wasn't a little bird. It was a Black Hawk.
Okay.
And the voice was actually a good friend of mine, Dan Gelata, who we're still pretty close. I'm his daughter's godfather, actually. He was the Starbird shot down, and it was his voice, and I still got it. I get a chill every time I think of that. I mean, this has just been a horrible experience at many levels, and you hear your friend calling to you from the sky. I mean, just incredibly emotional.
I think I would say the Somalis heard it too.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
They absolutely did. And then music. I mean, they were playing music. There's a tactical purpose to what they were doing that I won't get into, but it wasn't just for entertainment value. And I heard the music as well.
How about that?
Yeah.
With a certain song?
Well, yeah. And I'm not sure I'm 100% right on this, but I went with Hell's Bells because I think that is the song that I heard. And a funny story, again, I don't want to keep going down
That's all right.
these rabbit holes, but we're finishing the book, and there's a lot to finishing a book, and it's primarily getting all the pages right so the chapters end up in the correct locations. It's more to it than the
You
average
jumped
person
forward
would
and
think.
back from other missions too in the book.
Yeah, which again, that's a Tom Clancy thing, which I thought was kind of cool, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And we're about to go to publication, and they say, hey, we need the rights to Hell's Bells because we got lyrics from Hell's Bells in the book. And I said, well, how am I going to get that? And they said, well, we've tried to contact AC/DC's lawyer, and he's not responding. Will you call him? So I call him, and I'll never forget this guy's name. Handworker is his name.
Stop it.
That's his
He
name.
got beat up a lot as a kid.
So maybe you got to give him a little bit of latitude on his response. And I said, Mr. Handworker, my name is Mike Durant. I'm writing a book, and he says, cuts me off. Don't call me again. Click. And I experienced some of that in the campaign, by the way, when I tried fundraising, because you never know who you're calling. You could be calling somebody who's in
Yeah.
the other guy's camp.
Yeah.
It sucks. I hated it. That was the second worst thing about the whole campaign thing. But anyway, so I called the publisher. I said, hey, he hung up on me, and he told me not to call him again. I don't think this is going to work. And they said, all right, well, we got to pull the lyrics. So then that changes the formatting. Why I got into all this is now the pages all shift, right? So, but they're going to do it. Again, this sounds like it's impossible, but I'm actually at Target in the checkout line, and my cell phone rings. Answer the phone, Mike. Yeah, this is Mike. He says, well, I just want you to know that me and the boys are big fans of the military. And
Oh, it's a Handworker.
and no,
No?
it's not Handworker. He says, yeah, you can use our lyrics.
Oh.
We found your letter. Apparently, the publishing company had sent a letter to the band, and the lawyer put it in the green room. It was sitting there while they're waiting to go out on stage,
So one
and
of the
Brian
band members-
Johnson
No, kid.
read it. And I'm now on the phone with Brian Johnson, who gives me permission to use the lyrics. And I said, Brian, I know this is a little bit of trouble, but could you send me an email so we have some documentation here? So he sends me an email that says the same thing a few minutes later. I get on the phone to the publisher, and I said, you're not going to believe this, but Brian Johnson just called me. We're good to go. You don't have to change the book.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
What a great story. That's really maybe even better than your captain
minigun?
writing you a letter.
Oh,
Yeah, because I can remember we were staging out for a court on a search or a raid or something in Baghdad, and my battalion commander said, I looked at him and I said, hey, sir, PSYOPs is there. You got a music list?
Yeah.
And he went, I am partial to AC/DC. So we had to play Back in Black because we were exiting the target site. All right, well, tell you what, let me run forward a little bit. I want to ask you real quick before we get into post-military and all that and kind of wrap things up. But the movie, I mean, so I read the book and the movie of Black Hawk Down. Obviously, I think the whole world did. Catapulted your life into, again, a forward presence. Your name went from being all over the headlines during the actual event. Now you're all over the headlines again because the story is kind of gripping the world. I know about the book. Mark Bowden, my understanding is, did a pretty accurate job of researching and writing.
he did.
How was the movie? Was the movie, was it accurate? And by the way, have you ever watched it yourself?
I've not watched it a lot. I think I've watched it maybe twice. Waited quite a while because I just wasn't sure how I was going to react to it. But I always tell people it's accurate enough, meaning the main thing they do that's not correct is they combine characters. And when you ask them why they do that, it's because in a 2-hour feature film, you can't introduce 25 characters. You have to only introduce a handful of key. Otherwise, people will totally lose the plot. So what you're seeing is maybe some of the ground guys are actually representing the actions of 5 different people, all rolled into one. So the things actually happened, but that guy didn't do all those things. That's a generalization, but that's essentially the biggest deviation from the truth. There's a couple of small things, like they show us playing this.
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. I'm Scott Buttram with the Trussville Tribune, sitting in for Phil Williams today, and awaiting us on the phone is my friend, editor-in-chief of 1819, host of the Jeff Poor Radio Show, and now his columns appear weekly in the Trussville Tribune. Jeff Poor, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
I was reliably told I would be seeing video of you. I'm just seeing a still shot here.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
No video today.
You only do video of Dale's here, or is that the deal?
No, we wouldn't do that one either.
We wasn't filling up. Dale doesn't never do it. Every now and then I'm feeling like I need to be on video. I don't know why, but today I just it's a chaos in the studio.
Not feeling it today. Do you have the dogs or the kid?
The kid, school flooded over the weekend.
Flooded?
And, he's been out, so he got a second fall break. It flooded. And then you just like, what do you do?
Holy cow! I didn't know you guys got hit that hard down there.
We didn't. They're doing construction. They're adding on to it, and I guess they did not prepare properly.
Well, I'm sure he's enjoying fall break number 2, and it sounds like you've got no choice but to enjoy it too.
You may get the opportunity to hear him in the background here any moment.
Well, as you know, somebody that had kids well into their 40s, it won't faze me. If he chimes in, he chimes in. We'll be good with that. Hey, listen, we spoke with Danny Garrett a little earlier and got an update on the AHSAA situation, which was really no update. We know that there was a meeting between Executive Director Heath Harmon and the private schools recently. I'm being told, and I've actually heard this from a couple of places now, that the meeting didn't go all that well. That he was asking the private schools, to be allies and to support them in this, and at the same time telling them the problem with the Choose Act is it gives you guys an unfair advantage. They've treated private schools and the AHSAA like stepchildren for about 50 years. That had to be a pretty uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, and then now they are like wanting, I guess, I think this is so misguided, Scott, that they think that if they could just woo these private school guys to their side and get them to work the refs a little in Montgomery, that it all will be well. I don't, and it's tone deaf, and you're right. Like, why do these guys, should they play ball with you? Because they're going to do the John Carrolls or UMS rights or whatever are going to do what we're going to do with or without the Choose Act. I don't understand the calculus here.
I don't either, but I'm just fascinated by how this conversation. How did Heath Harmon open this conversation? We've violated a law that specifically says calls us by name, cannot do this. Well, we went ahead and did it. We've broken the law. We'd like you guys to join us and become, what do they call that? Accomplices after the fact? Is that what they call it?
Essentially, yeah.
How do you persuade a bunch of people to help you break the law? And of course, I will say this: private schools are not reliant on the state legislature for funding. I would probably be talking to his public school members who are totally reliant on the state for funding.
Scott, I think that they think that the private schools are the ones driving all of this. That they're the ones that why are we from point A to point B is because of the private schools. And that's not it. I mean, they're misunderstanding the politics and how school choice came to be. They have lost Donnie Chastain Who
Right.
is the? I
Right.
mean, he is the legislature's coach's coach, an educator, an AEA guy.
Yeah.
They have lost him. Whoever's advising these guys well, it's probably this. The people advising him, they're just not listening to their advice, and they're really being dumb about it.
Right. And I think there's also a real disconnect between public schools and parents that want school choice. I think in their mind they don't think it's that big a deal to most parents. At the same time, they appear to be terrified that there could be a mass walkout because kids now have school choice. And you and I talked about that throughout the school choice campaign. There was never going to be a mass exit of public schools. Most parents, it's just easier to have your kid in a public school. There was never going to be some big walkout and loss of students. But there are areas of the state, Jeff, where parents are going to seize the opportunity to get their kids out of miserably failing public schools. Those are in the Democrat area, and they were against school choice. Representative Garrett just told us, yeah, those guys are on board with us now.
Yeah. Well, is it just kind of, are we overthinking this? That has nothing to do with this, and it's just like, hey, you're not going to come tell us what to do. Who do you think you are? The Alabama legislature is going to boss around the Alabama High School Athletic Association. Do you know, Scott, that we were created through a federal mandate? They act like they have a consent decree.
Yeah.
They don't.
They don't.
But they think they do. They do. Then let's just say that. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
This is what they believe. What world do you just go willy-nilly violating the law and not just say, hey, okay, you do the Choose Act, we're taking you to court. We're taking you to federal court, and we're not going to be beholden to your state law. If you believe that this is where you are in the world right now, and they're not, but maybe that's it here, then why did they choose this method of going against the Alabama legislature and the governor?
Well, let's start with this. That's a credible question, because they have a long history of simply having the audacity to say, you're not bossing me around.
Right.
And they've won all these, they've won court decision after court decision that said, no, these are voluntary members of this group, and they have every right to set the rules and do what they want to do. Now that's of course a totally different issue than we're looking at right here, but they do have a long history of arrogance. So I think it's fair to ask that question because it's always been there. I also took a really close look at their 15-member central board. We see one retired private school coach, we see one public school coach, and we see 13, as Senator Chris Elliott refers to them, 13 educrats, superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals. Maybe it really is fear of school choice.
I mean, I was kind of dismissive of, oh, well, that's tinfoil hat silliness. These guys, they don't care about school choice. They just care about maintaining their fiefdom. But then if you put a bunch of guys who are ideologically opposed to school choice in this scenario, and they carry a lot of, they believe they're the juggernaut. They have a lot of weight. They have a lot of political clout. That it's important. The ends justify the means here. They have to stop public schools. The dollars that should be going to public schools from going to the private sector. That's just wrong.
Yeah,
that's just not the way our education system should be handled.
Well, and we do see on that list of central board members a couple of very outspoken superintendents who were very much opposed to school choice. And I'm starting to think that maybe in their mind, this was kind of their last shot back at the legislature. They got to be careful here because, we just had the guy on the phone that's going to set their budget. Every bit of their money has got to come through Montgomery. So they got to be careful what they do there. Maybe they saw this as a way to punish the parents that take advantage of school choice without punishing the legislature who passed the school choice bill. But it didn't work out that way for them, if that's what they were thinking.
Well, and that's the other thing. They think their management style it's sort of I don't know if it's quite how would you describe it, but there was a little bit of this like, okay, you go ahead and do what it's just like what they did with this court order that
Right.
says, okay, here's an injunction, you can play. Whether they just okay, we respect what the courts say, or well, we disagree, but we will honor. No, it's like okay, your kids can come here and play, but
At your
just
own
know we're going to
risk.
remember this.
Yeah,
We're
at
going to
your own
remember
risk.
this,
There'll be
and
forfeits if we flip it.
yeah, but it's even this. It's probably more punitive than that. And this is what they do. Spanish Fort, down here, they had an eligible player playing soccer, and I guess it was kind of the bureaucratic nightmare, and wasn't really sure about the eligibility, but wound up playing.
Hmm.
And then the Spanish Fort High School was like, wait, you told us initially that this would be okay. And we thought, well, we changed our minds, and the 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 school wanted to fight the AHSAA. Well, here's what they do: Spanish Fort High School is part of the Baldwin County school system, and they said, well, okay, you can fight us, but just know that entire school system, everything from the beaches all the way up to Monroe County, there's a lot of high school athletics there. We wouldn't want that to We want that your silly little girl soccer lawsuit to impact your entire school system, and the school system backed down. And this is sort of it's very it's a and you see this time and time again from
Time
this
and time.
organization,
Yeah.
and it's bad. It is not the way. It's not a good example for young minds, young student athletes at that impressionable age to see the way the world works, because the world doesn't work that way.
You know, I think they may have really underestimated Montgomery in this. That's what I keep coming back to. You've got the governor's office, and you've talked about this extensively, Jeff. The governor, she kind of picks her fights. She's not going to get in every one of them, but when she gets in, she is
Pleased to win.
That's right. She's not walking away. If she gets in the fight, she's in the fight. She jumped in this. The speaker jumped in this. You mentioned Donnie Chastain, who actually killed a school choice bill a year before we passed a school choice bill. He's the one that sent it to committee and basically sent it there to
Sat
die.
on it, yeah.
So
It went ETF, and then it went to Ed Policy, and then he's the chair of Ed Policy, and he just kind of sat on it till the last few days. Oh well, we think this needs to go back to the ETF, and that was all the tactic. Though you're right, they've underestimated, but they've always gotten their way. Now they hired the blue blood lobbying firm. They got Fine and Getty as their representation. They they have allies. They traditionally have had allies. Some of the Democrats. I think there's this here that they believe that if the legislature tries to do something, well, they got the manpower just to kill it.
Yeah,
and maybe they do, but they got a lot of lawmakers that are turning against them.
Oh yeah, I didn't even mention the lieutenant governor, who is fit to be tied over this, and now you got Democrat lawmakers who were anti-school choice are over there shaking their heads, going, no, we're not having this. Jeff, we're headed to a break. Can you hang with us through it?
Sure.
Good. Thank you for that. This is Scott Buttram sitting in for Phil Williams on Rightside Radio. Hang tight. We'll be back right after these messages.
Game over the radio between me and Cliff at the beginning of the movie. We didn't do that. I mean, we're not communicating on the radio unless we absolutely have to. It's just, standard military practice to not be yakking on the radios. Yeah. And again, they just did that to try to develop this relationship between us, I guess, but nothing really meaningful that is not correct.
But let me ask you this: did the movie do honor to the guys you served with?
I think so. I mean, I can't speak for the ground elements because I know some guys are represented as maybe on the kind of almost goofy side of the house. I'm sure they probably weren't real happy with it, but
Captain Steele and the Rangers was kind of represented as being a hard case that was difficult. I'm sure.
Yeah, and Steele was on my bird. I mean, I knew him.
Yeah.
I knew him pretty well, and I've seen him since. I haven't seen him in a while, but little known fact that he was actually a guard at Georgia when Herschel Walker was running back.
Oh, kidding.
Yeah, big dude.
He would have to be.
Yeah. He wore his rings, actually. Not in combat, but in the times that I met with him after the fact, because they were SEC. I think he was there when they were national champions as well. I think.
Wow.
Absolutely sure about the SEC. But anyway, I got off track there.
But it did do honor to your guys, you think?
I think so. Certainly the aviation part. Again, I can't speak for the ground. I don't know whether they would say the same thing. Still in touch with a lot of them, but and I've never really heard anyone come out and say, that movie's totally jacked up. Now, what was jacked up is this recent Netflix documentary, which is why I brought these notes. I didn't know how much, if you'd seen it or if you'd want to get into anything.
I've not seen it.
The spin they put on that is just, to me, unacceptable. I was pretty upset.
Spin in which way?
They basically make it sound like we're the villains. I mean, not
come
right out and do that. And really shocked me.
Wait, who made it? Was it Netflix, you said?
Well, it was made for Netflix. So I'm thinking, okay, I mean, it's going to be high quality. They're going to have a good budget. And it, generally speaking, should be pro-U.S. because I think the one thing it does is it tells the political story accurately. Well, the Netflix documentary does not. And
because there was a lot of politics behind the scenes.
100%, yeah.
I mean, y'all were into mission creep. You were into not being supported. You had the AC-130s that were pulled. You didn't have overhead cover. And then, getting the conventional forces in there for the rescue. Yep. We could go all day on the politics of this mission.
And, the problem was I don't have editorial authority on this Netflix piece, right?
Sure.
By the way, it was #1 globally for a week. That's how popular it was. I mean, because I called them afterwards, and the producer guy that I worked with, and I said, hey, man, you guys got this totally wrong. And
so you did call him.
Oh, yeah. And I sent them these 4 pages of after action comments about what they got wrong and, how do we fix this? And they said, well, we'll take it up to our management and see, what they want to do. And it was already out of the box. I mean, there was nothing we could do at that point. I tried to convince them, look, if you produce something that maybe goes to another level, that renews interest in the series and you get more viewers, and they didn't bite. So very frustrating because if it did get that much viewing, it didn't help our military. And
when did it come out?
Oh, not that long ago, probably 4 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it was probably filmed
over a year
over
ago.
the last year prior to, we could talk politics again on that. You know where I stand, I know where you stand. Yeah. But there was so much in the last 4 years, I think, where it almost like there was an effort to make sure the U.S. didn't look good.
Right.
Like we can't possibly let the U.S. look good, even though we're the U.S.
And my comments to them were, in the end, I haven't seen too many Somalis over here to keep any of our people from starving to death.
Wow.
It was pretty upsetting. And, they didn't even mention that Randy and Gary got the Medal of Honor. I mean, it was just, I don't know.
Well, listen, so I think, and I'll just say it from me personally, I think aside from everything you went through, and aside from your career, which was very specialized, very unique, very mission capable, I'm sitting here feeling rather impressed by the fact that you came home from that and didn't retire. You stayed in uniform. In fact, you stayed with the 160th, didn't you?
Right, for 8 more years.
I mean, I think I'll be honest with you. I think that some people would have come home and said, "I did my thing. Go ahead and medically discharge me and give me the paperwork. I'm out of here." So what was the mental mode for you to say, no, this is where I'm staying, and I got 8 more years in me?
It was who I was, and I guess I didn't want that mission.
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. I'm Scott Butford from the Trussville Tribune, sitting in today for Phil Williams. On the line with us is Jeff Poore from the Jeff Poore Radio Show and from 1819 News. Jeff, just before the break, and Jeff, by the way, I can't get JP to play any Waylon during our break. Is that something Phil doesn't allow up here? Is he not a Waylon fan?
He's got some very like cookie cutter music taste, doesn't he?
We were
I
just
mean, am I
talking.
wrong? Or, anybody want to step out of line here?
No,
you
Phil
you can tell me
is
off air if you need to.
Phil is vanilla all the way, which is why we love him. You and I were having a conversation earlier today on your show, and I kind of want to bring that back up because I'm bemused. That's the word I want to use. I'm bemused with the No Kings marches that took place over the weekend. Specifically, this group picture out of Birmingham where it showed, pretty good turnout for the No Kings March in Birmingham, Alabama. And that had to be the single whitest group picture I've ever seen come out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, you have to really try hard to go. I guess was it Kelly Ingram Park or Lynn Park or
Yeah.
and get that photo. It's just not possible under any other circumstances, apparently, except for a No Kings Democrat minded protest.
Yeah, and it's very interesting considering that I would be very comfortable saying the majority of the Democrat Party in Alabama is made up of African Americans. And it was the Democrats that were all behind the No Kings, but it didn't appear to be the majority of the Democratic Party in Alabama at the Birmingham March.
No, this is pretty true universally from sea to shining sea. It's
That's
made
right.
up of these aging boomers. Maybe they're not quite old enough for the '60s, but they're just that they came in a little late and they're trying to rekindle their youth. But it's amazing that those are the people who are the most passionately anti-Trump. I mean, it's just like it looked like these people would steal a baseball from my son, a home run ball at a baseball game if he had caught it. I mean, this is a sort of the demographic there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm gonna tell JP, turn your mic on, JP, get in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
As probably, I'm assuming the only boomer in this conversation, I'd like to address that. I was actually born in 1960, which is widely considered the last year of boomers. I recognize these people, Jeff, and that's what I want both of you young fellas to know. I've seen these people. I grew up with these people. We spent most of high school and college picking on these people. Some of them probably still have dried spitballs on the back of their head from high school days. Is this their moment of glory after being our victims all these years? Is this like their last say on the way to the grave?
I don't know, but it's a weird that this is the typecast who will take a Saturday morning, not to go up at a deer stand, not to watch College Game Day, not to do stuff with your family, or no, you're going to you're dressing up as a phallic symbol on the side of a major highway in Fairhope, Alabama, because you're so mad at the big bad orange man. I mean, what do you what's supposed to be my takeaway here? But there seems to be a common theme. I don't know. It's like there's some cats in need of a cat lady or something. It's really remarkable, Scott.
Well, and somebody texted in earlier. These are the Woodstock people, like the Woodstock generation. So it kind of tracks, like what Jeff said, trying to relive their youth. But the only way they can do it because they don't have fulfilling lives of their own is to go and bark at random people in public about why they hate Trump. So
what a shame to have your two biggest world events 50 years apart.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll be gone next. That's
Yeah.
about it. Hey, Jeff, we've got a break coming up here. We appreciate you joining us very much. That was Jeff Poor with the Jeff Poor Radio Show and the editor-in-chief of 1819 News, and my friend. I appreciate it. By the way, if you haven't seen his column in the Trustful Tribune, go online and read it right now. It is up. We're going to take a short break. This is Scott Buttram sitting in for Phil Williams. JP and I'll be right back.
My crew, my friends. I didn't want it to take away who I was. And, if I could get back to that same point in my life, which I loved. I mean, I loved what I was doing. Wow. It was my Super Bowl. It really was. I mean, when you got Delta Force on your aircraft and you're going in to hit a target that has national significance, I mean, that's pretty freaking cool. And
Half of the earth with the doors open.
And I was getting paid to do it. I mean, it went so far from, that first flight over Mount Washington thinking I could get paid to fly a helicopter to this is how I'm flying this helicopter at this point in my life. And just that it was my identity. And I just wanted it back. I really liked it. Now, because of my back, I was permanently grounded. So, and I always talk about this when I do presentations about that experience. So you're at another fork in your life, right? Do I accept the fact that I'm permanently grounded and get reclassified or get medicaled out or whatever, or do you fight it? And I decided to fight it. And I came up with a strategy that I would run the Marine Corps Marathon 10 months after they took my femur rod out of my leg. So they took the femur rod out in January. Marine Corps Marathon's in October.
So do you have a metal femur, a cadaver femur? What do you have?
No,
Femur.
well, it's gone now.
Oh,
But they actually, a femur rod, I'm sure you've seen a grounding rod like you
Yeah.
put in the field.
yeah.
That's what a femur rod looks like. It has a weighted thing on the end to pound it in and to pull it out that they screw in.
Yeah.
And it actually goes inside your femur. And there's only 3 screws. There's 2 screws at the bottom to hold the bottom in, and 1 screw that goes into your hip joint up at the top. And you can stand. I mean, as long as your muscles are strong enough, as soon as that femur rod's in, you can stand. I kept it in so that would have been a year. Let me make sure I got the timeline right here. No. Because it's 95 is when I ran the race. So it comes out in January 95. Yeah, okay. So it was in for a year. So imagine this piece of metal that's inside your bone, all this bone's growing all around it. There's a big knot where the fracture was. And they got to now drill the top of your femur and attach that weighted thing again and pound this thing out. And they took it out. It took them 8 hours to get it out. I'm told I'm unconscious the whole time. And now I can't walk again because of this trauma on my femur, but I'm going to run the marathon in October. Well, most people thought, no way. And I still remember, and this is why I try to stress to people, I'm not saying anything's possible, but everything's impossible if you don't give it your best, right? And I just said, all right, I'm going to run this race to prove they should let me back on flight status. Yeah. And I still remember the first mile I ran. I still remember the first 8-minute mile. And then summer comes around, and I'm thinking, man, I need more goals because I'm going to run this race, but now I need to have like finish time goals. So I came up with 5 goals. Goal number 1, finish the race. Goal number 2, beat Oprah Winfrey, because Oprah ran the Marine Corps Marathon, the same race in 1994.
Stop it.
1 year before. All right. And she did pretty well, actually. She did a lot better than most people thought. Oh. And then I had actually run the Marine Corps Marathon one time before. So I wanted to beat my previous time. I wanted to beat our commander's time because everybody wants to beat their commander, right? And then my 5th goal was qualify for Boston. Now, if you are a runner and you know qualifying times, qualifying for Boston, you are almost an elite runner. I mean, you got to haul butt. I made 4 out of 5 goals. The only thing I didn't do was qualify for Boston. Okay. But I was crushing it in the first half. And, I'm actually training now today. I ran this morning for the New York Marathon, which I'm running in November.
No kidding.
And the difference between now and 30 years ago is you have these gel packs that keep you from hitting the wall. The issue back then was we didn't have that stuff. So everybody's hitting the wall.
You were also younger back then.
Well, yeah, unless you're superhuman and train this distance all the time. And that's what happened. I was killing it in the first half. And then at 22 miles, I had nothing left in the tank. And that's because all your calories are gone.
Yeah.
So now I'm already running with consuming these gel packs. And it's amazing to me how many you're supposed to chew.
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. I'm Scott Buttram, sitting in today for Phil Williams. He's out of the office, and I'm out of my office at the Trussville Tribune. JP is here with me. He is going to help me carry this show to the close. You just heard from Jeff Poor, editor-in-chief of 1819 News and host of the Jeff Poor Radio Show. We just kind of covered a smorgasbord of subjects there. But, JP, one of the things we were talking about as we went to break there, and you were talking about it earlier, you and I've talked about it a little bit as well, the No Kings marches that I noticed some Democrats are really celebrating the turnout. That was clearly more of a liberal white elitist event than a Democrat event, wouldn't you say?
I would, and also a lot of people who were there, like reporters, said that they all oddly all kind of left really early into the event and all at the same time. So it almost had like an inorganic feel to it, and which is kind of odd. But I think, I mean, we've talked about it. They had nothing better to do on a Saturday. No grandkid t-ball game. No anything to do with their family. Like they chose their day off,
Right.
being miserable. But also you look at like some of the stuff they were saying, like mocking Charlie Kirk's death. There's another sign with a target over Trump's head saying, "I wish he didn't turn his head." Like they're just miserable people. And you look at one of the like biggest indicators for a side in politics or something that people are fighting for is to look at the people who are in support of it. And when you see these miserable people, you see miserable trans people at these events, and you look like, it's like, okay, well, if that's the people who are supporting this, then that probably is an indication of
Who wants to be part of that group?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do I want to be a part of the group that was spending their Saturday with their family, watching college football, cooking out, having a good, fun day off, or the people that were out being miserable? And also with the 7 million people came out, it's like, I think you mentioned it we saw the election day where even more people
77 million turned out and had their say.
Yeah, 77 million voted in this supposed king.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. And I think the Democrats were purposely shutting the government down until after this so that they could go to their supporters and be like, we're standing up to Trump. We're not letting them do it. And it's all fake and inorganic.
It is inorganic. I agree with that. It is inauthentic. You could just tell there was a staged feel about all of this. As you mentioned, they show up, they leave. Trump mentioned all the pre-printed signs.
Yes, exactly.
Somebody went to Office Depot and had a bunch of signs printed up. That's not what you see in an organic movement like that. It just, when you see a group picture in Birmingham, Alabama, which, by the way, is 70% black, and this huge group picture comes out of the No Kings March, and it's nothing but white people my age and older.
Yeah.
That's not the Alabama Democrats. That's not Birmingham.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the questions I wanted to ask Jeff, we watch Joyce Vance a lot on X. She is a professor at the University of Alabama Law School. I believe she was the attorney for the Northern District at one point. I wonder how many times we can see her or go out and pontificate or her legal opinion on social media and be wrong before a University of Alabama trustee says, is she actually helping the value of our law degrees here? Because we've got her teaching students and she's wrong a lot.
Well, one of the originators of the critical race theory is a law professor at Alabama, aren't they still?
I heard that at one point. I don't know what the status is of that now, but I think yes, at one point for sure.
So it's unfortunate, but but like you said, the demographic of the people protesting. I mean, there was somebody with a USSR flag in Huntsville. It's like, I grew up in Huntsville. Okay, that's not how a majority of people in Huntsville feel, but it's just, I don't know. It was an opportunity for weird, gross, people to get together and just be, grumpy. I mean, look at it in Portland too, where their form of protesting is just getting naked and getting on bikes and driving by ICE facilities. It's like that. It's just, they just look for opportunities to be gross, and it's,
What I would say to the group of Alabamians that showed up for the No Kings rally is, you just had a chance to witness a Republican primary for president and a Democratic primary for president. Which one looked more like a coronation to you? I mean, the Republicans actually voted on a candidate.
Yeah.
The Democrats appointed a candidate after rejecting the one the people voted for. So
exactly. And that's hypocritical aspect to it, and I guarantee you that the left is the one that would want a king.
Yeah.
If prompted. Like, I mean, we talked about it earlier. Bernie Sanders never got a chance to be the nominee. Hillary Clinton, they made sure Hillary was the one. RFK was ostracized out of the DNC last year, and then they just anointed Kamala Harris when she didn't even make it anywhere close to the end of the primary when she ran in
That's right.
2020. So it's
I don't think she made it to a single primary.
yeah,
I think she dropped out before they held the first primary.
So I don't know. It's just beyond hypocritical, but like I said, I feel bad for these people if their lives are like that.
Well, I will say this: Kamala did show up at one debate, called Joe Biden a racist, and then was asked to serve as his vice president.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's the way that party thinks. Let me ask you, JP. We're you and I talked earlier. The only true movement I see going on nationally with the Democrats is what we're seeing out of Bernie and AOC. And these rallies they're going to, these speeches they're making, where they are drawing crowds. They're obviously going to areas where they're preaching to the choir. We're in all probability about to see New York City elect a communist mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like many others. He can claim socialist till the cows come home, but he's preaching communism, not socialism. I really think we are probably seeing a slide of the majority of or the remaining majority of the Democratic Party. I think socialist is where they're headed. I really do.
I agree because, and I mentioned it earlier, the AOC is the one calling the shots during this whole shutdown.
Right.
AOC is the one telling them the talking points. AOC is the one, leading the charge behind the scenes.
She's the drawing card.
Yeah, she's the drawing card. And I think the AOC Mamdani sect of the Democratic Party is the one that is, because they're being driven by the most radical of their base, and that right now is the most radical of the left, and that's why everybody's talking about AOC running for Schumer's Senate seat. I think she's running for president in 28 personally.
Yeah, I do too.
And I think it will be Newsom and AOC kind of neck and neck, but I think AOC may just beat Newsom out in terms of radical and her messaging, because she is of the younger demographic and she knows how social media works and how to message. So I think the AOCs and the Mamdanis, I agree. I think that's the future for the Democratic Party. And like you said, his policies are communism, but they love to frame it as democratic socialist.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that put a button on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Also the poll of if you looked at American-born New York citizens and polling, they widely support Cuomo. The foreign-born New York City residents, it's like 65% are voting for Mamdani as mayor. And it's like, I really don't want New York City to turn into what I think it's going to turn into. But who knows? Maybe Mamdani ruining New York City is what's going to wake people up and go, oh, no, this is not the way to go.
Well, pictures came out over the weekend of him celebrating with the Muslim cleric who was one of the unindicted co-conspirators of 9/11. And now the guy who may be mayor of New York City is taking pictures, hugging and grinning with this guy.
That just shows
that's mind-boggling.
That's how comfortable he is. He's going to win. He doesn't care.
Right. I think he is going to win.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the party is going to take a hard shift in that direction. I think the Democrats are already on hard times, or are going to be on much harder times when they do that, at least for a little while. I also take note of this. I'm the last year of I was born in the last year of the baby boomers. I'm 65. A lot of people who have been in these people's way are dying off. Yep. I don't worry about me. Yeah. I think that they're probably putting themselves out of commission for probably most of the rest of my life. I worry about you. I worry about my son and my grandchildren and the society they're going to grow up. At some point, the economy is going to get tough.
Yeah.
And Republicans are going to be in charge. The economy is going to get tough. Things are going to become challenging. And quite often that happens due to circumstances that we don't really have any control over, like a worldwide recession, things like that happen. My concern is when we hit that rough spot, and those my age and older are gone. Will your age, I mean, I know where you'll be, but will that generation have the wherewithal to understand this is a bump in the road and we can't sell our country out because things got tougher a little bit.
Well, I'm actually optimistic because Phil and I actually had a whole segment or two on this yesterday about how much Gen Z has shifted to the right and how much Gen Z is going back to Christianity and
Yes.
conservatism. And so there's a tide shifting in my generation that's rejecting this crap.
Yep.
But it's also very polarized because the liberals of my generation are like the Mom Donnie AOC type. So I think the majority of my generation is shifting to the right to outnumber the radicals of my generation. We saw how much they turned out for Trump this past election and how much, after COVID, my generation has rejected the nihilistic atheism and going back to Christianity. So I'm optimistic, but like you said, the AOC, or excuse me, the Schumers, the Pelosi's, the older Democrats that are just playing to the radicals of their base like it's a fad. Eventually they're going to move out of the way, whether they leave office or whatever, and then it's going to be the younger Democrats that take over. I think my generation of conservatives will outnumber them. That's my take. But it's going to take my generation to get engaged too. So
that is probably the best point for reason of optimism that I've heard, because you're right that we're seeing our young people shift right now. Mm-hmm. They're very vocal. They're very involved, and it's not all about politics. A lot of it is about faith and returning to the faith of their parents, their grandparents. That's a huge factor, JP, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it was really that same age group, obviously not the same people, but that same age group is who put Obama in office.
Yeah.
That same age group is who showed up and put Biden in office. So to see this generation of that age group make such a powerful shift, and more importantly than politics, in their faith, does give me hope. You're right. That's a good point. And I'm glad you reminded me of that. We all need something to feel good about.
Optimism. Yeah.
And sometimes, I've got a son about to turn 40 and a daughter about to turn 20. That generation has been very different. Those two kids have been very different, just 20 years apart.
Yeah.
But I am starting to see a lot of positive there. So maybe that will be what carries us through. We'll have to see how that works out. What are we looking at on our next break?
Ready to go to break.
We got a time to go now. We'll take a quick break. I'm Scott Buttram. This is Rightside Radio. I'm sitting in for Phil Williams. He will be back tomorrow. JP's here with me. We'll be back to take you to the close right after this break. You stay with us.
Consume based on what the vendor tells you, like 2 an hour. So anyway, we'll see how that goes.
Of course, if you do what the vendor tells you, you're just buying more from the vendor at that point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, I ran it in 3 hours, 37 minutes, which is pretty darn good for a guy who couldn't walk 10 months prior.
And bottom line is, night stalkers don't quit, right?
There you go. And I got back on flight status, and I stayed on flight status until I retired in 2001.
And you retired on your own steam.
That's right. And it feels a lot better when you can say,
well, by God,
it's my time. I'm ready to go. There's more people here that can take the roles. And I think it was the right time.
Well, I think that's very cool. Listen, we'll spend a few minutes. Life after the Army. How, by the way, of course, you've been to Fort Rucker, Alabama. How'd you wind up in Huntsville, which is my hometown? How did you wind up in Huntsville?
Well, that's
Alabama?
A perfect segue, because at that retirement point at 22 years, where do you go?
Yeah.
So I interviewed a couple jobs outside the gate at Fort Campbell, which is where I retired from, and there wasn't anything really all that interesting to me. And then I had a friend who was down here working on Redstone Arsenal and said, hey, there's a lot of opportunity down here, and it's a pretty good town. And
what year did you come here? Right after retirement?
2001.
Yeah.
Yep. And I came down here to work on a new helicopter that the Army was developing at the time called a Comanche, which is now in a museum and never got built.
Yeah.
But
nice big paperweight.
Yeah. But it was a great transition for me to go from operator, flight line guy to industry guy. It's kind of hard, actually, to go straight from one to the other. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of learning involved, and it was a great opportunity for me to figure it out, and really prepared me to then ultimately start my own company.
But saying that you started your own company, Pinnacle was your first company. Okay, and you rode that one until you retired from that, right?
15 years.
What was especially, by the way, I know it was still within the aviation industry, but what did you do?
So we settled on telling people to answer this question by saying we did everything in the aviation industry except build the aircraft. And it was true. I mean, training, flight crews, maintenance, logistics, engineering, flight simulators, tech pubs, everything. And we were at our peak almost 700 people if you count our subcontractors.
No kidding.
Yeah. So it was very, very successful. And then, but I mean, it's a grind. You know, again, when I was running the campaign, you know, trying to explain to people, no, I didn't really follow politics all that closely because I'm running a company and it is a grind. I mean, you go from one proposal to the next. And when you got 700 people working for you, there's an issue every moment of the day. Yeah. And that was my focus, and, you know, that and my family. And we did really well, and I'm really proud of what we accomplished.
Raised 6 kids.
Yeah. And let me brag on my wife for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, first of all,
were you married during Mogadishu? And all
yes,
that? Okay.
but not to Lisa.
Okay.
So she is actually an Army aviator as well,
No kidding.
and outranks me. So she's a major. So when you lay out the, you know, I could put Lisa over here, the sergeant over here, and I'm in the middle. She only spent 8 years in the military and then got out to raise a family. She's a Gold Star wife. Her husband was killed in a Chinook crash,
Wow.
actually from the 160th. I had met him, but I didn't really know him. But again, it's one of those moments where I could still tell you exactly where I was when I heard that there'd been a Chinook crash, and he was killed. The whole crew was lost in that accident. She was pregnant with our daughter Dina, who's now doing really well. Actually worked for Pinnacle for many years. Was a tremendous employee. And why I want to brag on my wife is not only did she do all that, but she had a friend in high school who had a bad kidney, and she got a cadaver kidney when she was, may have even been still a teenager, and they called it Rudy. I think Rudy was the name of the guy who was killed in this bar shooting, actually, is where the kidney came from.
Okay.
And Rudy functioned fine for 40 years. And then Glow, who's Lisa's friend, started to decline because the kidney was failing, and she was going to have to go on dialysis. And she got on the waiting list.
Wow.
And Lisa stepped up and said, I'll see if I'm a match. And she was a match. And 6 weeks ago today, we were in Pittsburgh, and Lisa got her kidney removed and put in Glow.
That's awesome.
So that Glow is not having to go on dialysis and get
That's awesome.
hopefully another 40 years of life.
That's awesome.
And Lisa, today, why I know it's 6 weeks ago today is that she had no heavy lifting until today. And now she can get her riding bike going again and all the things that she likes to do.
You tell her I want to do a podcast with her.
Well, I asked her, she
Welcome back to Rightside Radio. This is Scott Buttram sitting in for Phil Williams today. JP is joining me. Quick shout out to John in Huntsville. John, I saw you text. I apologize for the Alabama hoodie. And John, obviously, is my favorite audience member of all time because he always gives me good grades. Mm-hmm. But John probably doesn't know I grew up in Tuscaloosa, spent 40 years there. John, I'm sorry. I apologize, man, but you just can't wash it off after you've lived in the promised land for 40 years.
Yes,
you know, I'm sorry, but you're still my favorite. You're still my favorite audience member. But we've got another favorite audience member on the line. This has kind of become his segment, as we talked about earlier. And this is Jeff from Indiana, our favorite truck driver. Jeff, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing real good. I'm on the north side of Nashville, and that's all that matters.
Okay, I don't understand that. You and JP were talking about Nashville. Is that just an area you hate to go through? What's going on with that?
I go through there twice a day.
Twice a day?
And people in Nashville have a knack for not being able to drive, I think. So it's always more fun than I should be allowed to have.
Hey, maybe that's a Tennessee thing, because I feel the same way about driving through Chattanooga. I'd rather cut my wrist and bleed out on the interstate than drive through Chattanooga.
Oh, I don't know if it's anywhere. It can't be no worse than Nashville.
Well, hey, Jeff, what's been on your mind today?
you're talking about these No Kings protests and everything we had.
Yeah.
The Democrats, that's what they call them, is the No Kings protest. And we tend to call them the No Brains protest because if you're standing around there holding these signs, you're pretty much telling the world you'd have no brains. And being this close to Halloween, it's a safe bet that if you're being chased by zombies, just run into that crowd and everything, and they'll go away because zombies are looking for brains, and they won't find any there.
I like that. I wonder, have you been able to follow the news at all? 1819 has been reporting on one of the gatherings. I think this was a No Kings deal down in Fairhope, Alabama, where one of the protesters showed up. How do we describe this, JP? We're on the radio. We got FCC rules. Showed up wearing a costume.
Oh yeah, Phil and I actually talked about it yesterday. A male genitalia costume.
Genitalia costume. I would not have come up with that phrase. That'll work. And the police had to tackle the male genitalia costume.
And it actually was a woman wearing the costume.
It was
in her 60s,
which was kind of bizarre, all of its own. Have you also noticed, Jeff, that everybody showing up for these protests are white?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? I mean, like you said earlier, the majority of Democrats in Alabama are mostly black especially around the cities and stuff. But, well, maybe that's the smarter Democrat or something. I don't know. The white liberals are usually telling people, how these other people are and everything, they always go around saying, well, blacks don't have enough sense to go vote or register or anything else. And I think the blacks are showing them that they're probably smarter than they are.
I think that's been the case for a long time. And in fact, honestly, I think one of the reasons we're seeing so many African American voters shift to the Republican Party is they've just had enough of that. They've had enough of liberal white elitists looking down their noses at them, acting as if they can't take care of themselves. It's insulting. And I think about my black friends and just, their families, their jobs, what they do. These are some of the most successful people I know. And I mean that in professional, personal, faith. My black friends are some of the most successful people I know across the board. I've never asked them how they felt about a political party that treats them as a race like they can't take care of themselves, but I've got a pretty good idea of how they would respond to that.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how the white liberals con the black people into becoming from Republicans what they used to be after the Civil War into becoming Democrats. Because they did a pretty good job of convincing him that they're not the party of Jim Crow, they're not the party of the KKK, and that the Republicans are, for some reason, that the party that freed the slaves is the party that hates them. So, I don't know how they brainwashed them, but they did a good job.
I can tell you, as someone who grew up in Alabama, they had a whole lot of help from Democrat George Wallace. Or you would have thought that he would have had a lot of help in showing them that was not the way to go. But I think Kennedy pulled a lot of them in and used George Wallace as his foil to do that. Jeff, thank you for joining us. We're going to wrap it up now. JP, thank you for getting us through the afternoon. I'm Scott Buttram, sitting in for Phil Williams. This has been Rightside Radio.